kidding.
I know you're good.
Ready to roll. Okay, thank you. Let's call to order the Program and Personnel Committee meeting for Monday, January 10th, 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll start by, we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Flags over here. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So I'll just real quick review the agenda here before we get started. Opening up with any communications, any public that might want to speak. We're going to review the committee summary from December. We're going to look at COVID metrics. We're going to look at the Be Smart program. We have a list of personnel items for your review. And then a second reading on our board policies. We ran through these in December. And then a first reading for another group of board policies. There were quite a few this last round, so we split them up into two. And then discuss the flexible schedule for second semester, the rescheduled EdRed legislative meeting, and any future agenda items. Anything to add or discuss from that? Okay.
Can I just note
Sure.
that in addition to streaming this meeting, we will also be posting the recording on our website.
Yeah, that's something new for the starting with this one. It's a great idea. Okay, communications. Anyone from the public here that wants to speak?
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear this? Can I move it up a little? Okay. Okay. I put a white folder on everybody's desk, I think, that just has some of the materials that I'm going to refer to, and let me know if you can't hear me. So hello, everyone. Thank you for your hard work leading the district. My name is Mary Jane Wang. I'm a mother of 2 current students, and I'm here to talk about a source of concern that's weighed on the minds of all of us lately. And that is the sharp rise we have seen in school shootings. And inside your folder on the left side, there's a graph showing that rise. 2021 saw a record number of these devastating events, the highest number of school shootings by far in over 2 decades. We saw this play out in the tragedy at Oxford High School, Michigan, when a 15-year-old student took a loaded unlocked gun from home and brought it to school, killing 4 classmates and injuring 7 others. And none of us want to see something like that happen here. The phenomenon of school shootings has been studied extensively for decades by law enforcement, like the U.S. Secret Service. In their analysis of the data compiled from each tragedy, they discovered that 80% of school shooters are students from the school using guns they took from home. That's why the U.S. Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center concluded that preventing unsupervised youth access to unsecured guns in the home is a crucial part of comprehensive school safety planning. Experts believe that half of all previous school shootings could actually have been prevented with safe storage. So that's an area where we can actually work to provide a safer environment by raising awareness about this. This guidance has been echoed by our own local law enforcement as well. In your folders, you have letters from both the Lake County Sheriff and the Vernon Hills Police Department's own officer, Hemeseth, who wrote letters encouraging school districts and D128 specifically to start distributing secure gun storage information to all parents annually in an effort to keep students safe. About 60 school districts across the nation have already started doing this, and they're distributing secure storage information to their parents. And this is in an effort to prevent a shooting from being possible in the first place. Here in Illinois, Geneva School District 304 passed a resolution in 2020 to do so. I've provided you with packets that include Geneva's resolution wording, as well as the letter they send home to their district parents. I've also provided you with a petition signed by over 150 parents here who would like you to start distributing safe storage information to help keep our schools safe. The bottom line is this: we all want to know that the district is doing everything possible to prevent a tragedy like what happened in Michigan. Let's listen and be proactive, acting on the guidance from national and local law enforcement experts to ensure the safety of our D128 students. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, and I understand we're going to hear more about this topic in our later in our agenda. So moving on, review the.
I have,
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
okay.
Yeah,
That's
we're
okay.
still doing the written ones.
that's
Okay,
okay. I
thanks,
have
Mary.
3 additional letters to share. The first one is from Kristen Cresswell Isberg. Dear principals, board members, and superintendents. Here is my current understanding of the situation with COVID and Omicron. Lake County is in a very high transmission with a daily average of 204.7 cases per 100,000. Hospitals are at or near capacity, and the positivity rate is 19%. Pediatric hospitalizations, while still low compared to adult, are at the highest rate seen for this entire pandemic. Especially vulnerable are those too young to qualify for vaccination. Estimates for lingering health issues post-infection, including long COVID and post-viral syndrome, are as high as 50%. Omicron is dramatically more transmissible than Delta and can escape the first-line antibody defenses of vaccinated and previously infected individuals. Consequently, vaccinated individuals and those previously infected are also at risk of illness and spreading the virus to others. This is unlike the situation with Delta, which was primarily driven by unvaccinated masks off during lunch. Unvaccinated, period. Masks off during lunch will create the perfect opportunity for spread with an aerosolized virus as contagious as Omicron, as does low quality masks, loose masks, and improper mask wearing. With this in mind, there will be more children and staff at risk for infection and the need to isolate or quarantine. Without sufficient staff to properly teach classes and large numbers of children out either isolating or quarantining who do not have access to quality daily lessons, we risk merely housing children in schools with nothing more than adult supervision. This is not the quality education that we all desire and want. In person is the gold standard. We all understand this. However, it would seem to be prudent for the next few weeks to offer a higher level of educational instruction remotely until we see a significant reduction in daily cases, less staff and student absences, and improvement in the capacity of our healthcare systems to care for those who are ill. The next message is from Sue Sarah. Good morning. I thought I'd share this article from Time Magazine with all of you. I think it is important to read as it presents what appears to be the most rational piece of journalism I've come across in 2 years. I am hoping you will consider the reality of COVID not going away and our need to adapt and not think or believe that the cancel culture is our first and only option. My family and many others in the community believe with our whole hearts that we cannot go backwards. School needs to remain open. The gain of staying in the classroom far exceeds the risk of what is now a mild case of COVID. I feel the board and administration has done a great job of keeping cases and emotions under control up to this point. Let's not undo that progress. With respect and hope that we do not go backwards. And when I share these with you, it contains the link to the article.
So she actually emailed that to the board. So we all have that. in
Oh,
our
okay.
email. Yeah, thank
Very
you.
good. And the last letter is from Julie Bamer. Hello, D128 leadership. Thank you for your valuable work in leading the education of our students and, most importantly, keeping them safe. My name is Julie Bamer, and I am a mother of 2 current Vernon Hills High School juniors and a recent 2021 graduate. The purpose of this email is to voice my support for D128 to distribute safe gun storage information to all families. I come from a different background than the vast majority of parents in D128. I grew up in a rural area in far northern Wisconsin, where guns were prevalent in most homes for the purpose of hunting, and I served 20 years in the Navy, where I qualified on multiple weapons due to my duties with warfare units. I am I adamantly support the Second Amendment and just as strongly support the safe storage of those weapons. I grew up in a home with hunting rifles, and while I was taught to respect those weapons, they were never actually locked up until my parents had grandkids. Amazing how quickly a gun safe was purchased once grandkids were involved. There were two experiences I had growing up that motivate me to support the distribution of safe gun storage information. The first occurred when I was in middle school more than 40 years ago, and I can still remember exactly where I was when I got the sad news that a local 9-year-old boy had committed suicide with a family-owned handgun. He was the youngest of 5 children in the prominent local family, and to everyone in the community, this family was viewed as the ideal family with the children all academically and athletically gifted. The 9-year-old boy left a suicide note, though, that he thought he wasn't going to live up to the family expectations. The weapon being properly stored would have prevented this tragic loss. The other experience I had that motivates my belief in safe gun storage occurred Halloween of my sophomore year in high school. In this case, it involved a very poor family with 8 children and alcoholic parents who abused their children when drunk. That Halloween, my classmate, Carl, decided he wouldn't tolerate he and his siblings being beaten any longer. While his father was beating one of his sisters, Carl, in a rage, grabbed a nearby shotgun and proceeded to kill both of his parents. Carl immediately lost his childhood and really the rest of his life as he spent the next 20 years in prison. In this case, safe gun storage would have prevented a double homicide and have kept a truly polite and pleasant boy out of prison. Hopefully, we all at least recognize that youth suicide has been a dramatic increase due to the detrimental mental health impact of COVID. About 40% of youth suicides involve the use of a gun, and 90% of those attempts are lethal. When you think about the impulsiveness of teens, hopefully you all realize that this could be your child or the child of a loved one. As much as you'd like to believe otherwise, no family is immune to an acute mental health crisis. Having been in healthcare for 35 years, I have witnessed the rise in mental health illness throughout the population and especially in our youth. When survivors of youth suicide attempts have been interviewed, they reported spending only 10 to 20 minutes making the decision to die and then carrying out their attempt. Unsupervised access to a weapon in a home during that time of crisis often is the difference, whether an attempt is executed or not.
Mary,
Yes.
how much longer is it?
Another paragraph.
Okay,
mean-
we're well over the 3 minutes already, so.
Okay. Do you want me to skip to the end or?
Yeah, if you can skip to the end and then make sure that we all have copies of
Sure.
that afterwards.
D128 does an exemplary job in educating our youth. I hope you, as the leaders of the district, will support educating families about safe gun storage to help prevent any more tragic loss in our community. Please don't hesitate to reach out if I can provide additional information to help you reach the decision to support distributing safe gun storage information to all D128 families.
That's it. All right, thank you. Sorry that I almost skipped over you. Moving on, review of December committee summary. Any questions or comments, corrections? Okay, we'll move on to COVID metrics. Bryant?
Sure. So the update on the metrics that I put on our website, monitoring, both Libertyville, Vernon Hills, and just to give you a little perspective, so this is on our COVID-19 dashboard. Back at the beginning of December, Libertyville was at 4.5%, Vernon Hills at 3.09% positivity rate. Mid-December, 2.4 for Libertyville, Vernon Hills at 1.84. And then at the end of December, so the 31st, Libertyville was at 12.58% and Vernon Hills at 10.2%. And then today I pulled up the data. So today, if I look at Vernon Hills, the 7-day rolling positivity is at 14.69. percent, and then at Libertyville is at 16.99% positivity. So obviously there, and as everyone's seen, there's, a spike from the holidays and higher positivity rate. We did come back to school today. I think some of the information that we sent out to both our staff and our students to get our, families ready to come back really helped from what we saw of other schools coming back last week on Monday and kind of scrambling. And, I know it's always difficult to, kind of step back into school, but I think some of the work that we did last week and information we sent out did help. So we were able to successfully open the schools up with staff. When we started, the nice thing is by sending out information to our staff, they were, talking to me about their situations, and we were trying to monitor and get subs in line. And we, if we waited till Sunday night or Monday morning, we were afraid we weren't going to find subs. So we got a lot of things lined up, ready to go. And that's how I think that really just, helped us a lot in areas. The other thing that really helped us was the ability to look at the new CDC guidance. And so I'll kind of review some of that points for you, because what we sent out yesterday was long, but it, we tried to provide as much information, I think, to everyone. I thought it was important to have all of that in there. So if you recall, the guidance before for both somebody that had to quarantine or somebody that had COVID, it was a 10 days from 10 to 14 days, again, depending on coming back to school or coming back to extracurriculars, depending on when the symptoms started or testing, or when, somebody was in close contact. So CDC dropped that all the way down to, 5 days. We were waiting on word from, basically we were waiting on word from Illinois Department of Public Health and ISB and Lake County to update their guidance. They sent some out late, like Friday, saying we're adopting it, but they never put anything in print, and they still haven't put anything in print. I reached out to Lake County at that time, reached out to a bunch of other school districts to see what they were doing. I talked to our attorney, and they all said, hey, you can go ahead and, start using the new CDC guidance. Cause I said, we're going back to school. When I talked to Lake County, I'm like, we're going back to school on Monday. Like, I got to look at staff. So, because everyone said they're adopting it, there just may be some nuances that we'll have to work through. And some of the nuances, are a little bit still with like athletics. So anyways, just to kind of highlight some of the things is, again, it's 5 days. And when they say 5-day quarantine, and we tried to explain this in the letter, day 0 is the contact day, or it's the day symptoms started, or it's the day that you got to test if you're asymptomatic. So that's day 0. Then it's 5-day quarantine. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, return on day 6. So in totality, it's 7 days, but it's a 5-day quarantine where day 0 and 6 don't count. And I know that's confusing. We tried to explain that all the time. So before, when it was 10 days, it was the same thing. Day 0, 10 days, return on day 11. But again, it is with a caveat. And the caveat is you need to be fever-free for 24 hours and symptoms improving. Doesn't mean symptoms free, but symptoms improving. And in talking to that, obviously we may have to have discussions and ask people questions like, are you, how much are you improving? We will err on the side of being conservative and telling either a staff member or student, if you really don't think you're improving, stay home another day. It's not going to hurt. We have remote learning for those students that are home with COVID. We have options for our staff, but we would rather be conservative, because what's a day, So that's the one thing, because you could say I'm improving, but how much? Some of the other, I think, nuances that are new also is who is a close contact. So in the new CDC guidance, if you were fully vaccinated before, you didn't have to quarantine. And now they're saying if you're 18 or over and you are booster eligible, you have to have the booster, to not be considered a close contact and have to quarantine. So the booster eligible means that you're 6 months removed from most, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but you're 6 months removed from your second shot. So if somebody just got their vaccines now, they just got 1 and 2 just recently, they're not booster eligible. And if they come in close contact, they don't need a quarantine. But if you are booster eligible and should have it, you should go get the booster so that you don't have to quarantine. That's 18 and over. So that's our seniors and our staff. The 17 and under do not need to have a booster. They're still considered fully vaccinated. So I think one of the information Denise and I talked about was trying to send something out to our staff to encourage them if they haven't gotten the booster. First of all, thank them for everything to prepare and come back to school, but also highlight this piece that's kind of new from the CDC and then encourage people to get their boosters. And again, people are still getting COVID with vaccines and the boosters. The thing is that it's supposed to help and lessen and not get us sick. So the other piece is when somebody does come back after the 5-day quarantine, they do have to wear masks for days 6 through 10. They're supposed to still wear them at home for days 6 through 10 as much as possible. And when they come back to school, obviously we are, wearing masks. Lunch, we are working to make sure those students then are going to our 2 lunchrooms that we have where they can be 6 feet apart from other students and eat lunch during that time. And then we're still working through the athletic piece because there are some sports that they can wear a mask when they come back, and there's some sports that they aren't wearing a mask. And so we're working on some of those nuances. And but the families that we talked to over the weekend, we sent out the information, but then both schools called all the families of the new date. Most people were very thankful for upping the timeline. So that's where we're at right now. We're still testing. And again, right now, we're shield testing, and we're shield testing our unvaccinated staff per the executive order. So that's only unvaccinated staff. That hasn't changed to say test those that haven't got the booster, just as unvaccinated. And then we're testing our unvaccinated athletes that are in extracurriculars. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Any questions?
I know that's a lot.
To commend Bryant and the entire leadership team. I've been on the phone with him. I know we've been talking. I feel proud that we are a district that is kind of being leaders and at the forefront of this. Not every district is doing that. So I'd like to recognize them for really, they didn't have to. We certainly could have waited until there was an official statement. So I really am thankful for you being so proactive.
And again, thank you to our nurses and our athletic directors. So if people don't know, obviously over winter break, we still had a lot of athletics going on, and John Woods and Brian McDonald did a lot of work of staying in touch with families and trying to do what they could. We did put a couple teams on pause over winter break, and talking to the coaches, talking to some of the kids, and, it didn't really affect a lot of our competition. So rather than have them come in for practice for 3-4 days, sometimes, we just kind of put them on a week pause during winter break to try to prevent some of that. So John and Brian, I just really like to commend for, all the work they did, over winter break. So it's a little harder during winter break in the fact that the students are coming for practice, but then they're going home or they're going elsewhere, and they have a lot of more unmasked contact. And so I think, there was more situations during athletics just because of that, but they did a great job with that. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
My question is, did Dr. Herman get to teach today? Did you sub?
I did not need to sub. I was ready. I was ready. Actually, Bryant did a nice job giving us a heads up last night before we went to bed, and then again this morning to see if all classes were covered. But we had a plan for us district office staff to be ready to cover a classroom or all hands on deck. Knock on wood, hopefully we have just as many capable subs the rest of the week.
I hope so too. And it's nice to see everybody ready and willing to roll up their sleeves. And Bryant, your communication out to families, I think, was excellent. I only saw 2 minor questions as a follow-up. I know the nurses have done an incredible job. And I share your congratulations of their really tireless efforts along with the ADs. So thank you to
Mhm.
everybody.
Yep, a lot of hard work going on in the background.
Yeah.
That we don't see. So, yeah, thank you. Okay. Nothing else? Move on to the Be Smart for Kids.
Well, thank you. I requested to have this agenda item added based on a sort of a alignment of stars in the sky. Back in the fall, we had a conversation, we were talking about resolutions that were going before the whole school board. And we had a good conversation earlier this year about people's perspective on making sure that we vote as a board to advocate for the statewide board resolution. Then in December, we had a social media post about some potential violence at one of our schools. And we did an amazing job responding to that in terms of threat assessments and doing the investigation and working with our police. And again, it just brought to attention the idea that, gun safety is important at every school in the United States, including our 2 high schools. And then in addition, many of you know that an issue near and dear to my heart is suicide prevention. And the work that I've done in my previous school districts talks to the importance of means restriction. That can be restriction to guns, that could be restriction to medication. It could be restrictions to other things, as in Palo Alto, where we had a lot of traffic safety around the Metra that was there. So whatever is a means that might be accessible to the students in your community, what can you do to try and prevent that access? So for all of those reasons, when parents in the community asked me to bring this to the board as a consideration, I felt that the time was right. One of the proudest moments that I've had so far in the district is the joint message that we sent from both Libertyville and Vernon Hills Police, as well as myself and the other 4 feeder superintendents, talking about the coordination that we were having in response to the social media, again, scare that happened in December, and that we all were working together and sharing information. So that's the perspective from which I'm bringing this idea to you. What I'm asking for is just direction and input. There's not one right way to consider moving forward. There are things that we could do should we choose to. It could be just making a resolution saying that we think this is important. It could be something more than that in terms of integrating some of these things into our safety policy or safety committee. So what I'm interested tonight is giving a chance to hear from each one of you, just in general, what you think from your vantage point as a school board member about this issue, and what direction you'd like to give me for potentially bringing back something. So tonight is just discussion and giving direction to me for further consideration.
So I'll just start with one quick comment, and something that you mentioned triggered this. Is this something that we should or could be doing in conjunction with our center districts?
Yes, actually, I've had a conversation with the superintendent from District 73. He and I had a conversation, and he is also bringing this idea, the concept, to his board this month. I was not able to do that in time for the other 2 center districts to be able to have it on their January agenda, but we are meeting Wednesday, the 5 of us, and we will report on progress to this. So this is something that I see being a potential thing for us to do as a whole community.
Yeah.
I think keeping students safe is a community effort. And as the educational organization for our community, that's our role. Our role is not to be the police. Our role is to educate. And I see this as just being an opportunity to educate the public. So thank you. And I would want it to be a joint effort.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I like it. Oh, I think it is it's it takes a village, right, to raise a child. So all these children are our children. So we have to do what we can to keep them safe.
How do you envision communicating our support of this?
Well, and that's what I would want to get, if there were any ideas that you had. I would work with Geneva, who I actually was in St. Charles when Geneva did this resolution back in 2020. So I did see the community support as well as some pushback from the community. So I know that this isn't something that we would want to consider lightly. That's why I wanted to have a conversation with you about it before I even thought of bringing something more structured. My perspective would be that our role is education and education only. Our goal is just to talk about what safe storage means, just how when we educate the parents on things about signs for our staff and other people on signs of eating disorders or anything like that, so that they can help keep their children safe. I look at this as another thing of parent education. So it could be through a back to school night. It could be through one of our mailers that we send. I think that would be something that I'd want to get some parent input on, to say what would be meaningful ways for you to receive this. So that would be something that I'd want to bring options to the board to consider.
I support putting wheels in motion on this. And, you know, before anything officially is put into motion, certainly just having awareness brought into the community is going to help kind of start these conversations, be they completely, you know, drama-free or a little more difficult to have. They're important conversations to have at a community level. And I think every parent appreciates our goal to keep our students safe. You know, period, end of sentence. So however that ends up manifesting itself down the road, you know, I'm certainly in support of us taking, like I said, more official action to start this discussion.
As I think of communication, I'm thinking about it's not just how to communicate, but how often do you communicate? Right. And what are some of the channels you could use to communicate? Like, yes, you could mail things, but do people read mail that comes to their house? But there are people who actually do read mail, and then some who don't. So I think we have to think about what are effective ways of that education.
I've
How
seen
frequently you want to do it.
I've seen both active and sort of passive, the idea of a PSA that could be recorded. And then I've seen some districts even put that on their website. So here's our, our school safety website, and here's our resolution statement. Here's some information on suicide prevention or on gun safety, or, whatever else that we might think would be helpful. Here's what we do for our threat assessments. I guess I just see this as a whole. Right now, this is the potential before us, but I see an opportunity for us to educate the community in not just gun safety storage, but here are the top 3 things to look for if you're having a conversation that's concerning to you, or there's just so many possible ways we could connect our resources and fulfill our responsibility to educate the whole community on things like this.
Excuse me, Sonal, could you move your mic a little closer?
Don, were you going to say something?
I'm strongly in support. I think anything that we can do to reduce the risk of one of our students gaining access to something that they should not have access to is something we should be doing. It astounds me that we would have to educate a gun owner. The people that I know that live in this area that have guns lock their guns. I can remember the days of having little kids and saying, well, do they have guns in their house? Like, do having that conversation with my wife about whether or not my kids are going to go someplace and play at somebody else's house and not knowing whether or not, like, those are conversations that we had. I think that it's important, and it's late.
Well, growing up, I did take junior rifleman, so I did get my sharpshooter. So I am trained in how to use a firearm, and my husband hunted. So to me, this is a separate issue from gun rights. I think that is people's individual rights. That is not at all what I'm talking about. I just want to educate people. Should you choose to have guns in your home, here's some information we think will help keep you and your children safe. So I just want to make sure everyone's very clear about that as well.
Right. We are not saying you can't have a gun.
Correct.
Saying be responsible.
So
You know-
one kind of point of clarification. So when we say community, we mean the community, whether or not you have children in the school, right?
I think we have opportunities to, our first audience, I think we're our parents. But I think we have a secondary way to communicate with all of our community members, and I'd want to explore those with potentially village boards or something else like that. So I think that we have direct access to families, but we have secondary access to beyond. And I'd be open to both.
I
think
support
it's
us
good.
moving forward, but do we have an alignment with, either the police department, Vernon Hills, Libertyville? It would seem to be more powerful if we can bring in more community stakeholders
Right.
to share in developing whatever it is that we're going to disseminate.
That is part of, so far we've received support letters from the police chief in Vernon Hills.
I
and-
saw that, yeah.
And for Lake County. I have not had the opportunity to have a targeted conversation with the police chief in Libertyville yet, although we worked together in December. It was actually on specific cases, so we didn't have a chance to debrief about this, but that will be next. We also coordinate work with the Regional Office of Education in terms of our school safety plan and other things like that. So I would see them being another partner that we would want to bring into the conversation.
And did I hear you say even the feeder schools? So
Yes.
73 and 70. So this is something that could be much more. It's not even a D28, although I would support a D128 resolution. But
I think it would have, yes, stronger impact if it is a whole community.
A consistent message throughout the community,
Yeah.
that's everyone's saying the same thing and really pushing forward with the same message.
Mhm.
I think it's similar to the communication that we're already doing around other issues. For example, right as winter break was starting, we as parents received a message from Greg Stilling reminding us about some of the red flags to look for when students are off for break, safe socializing, and a reminder that it is not legal to provide alcohol to students. It had an interactive a link to an interactive website where you could click through a sample teenage bedroom and see places where dangerous items might be hidden. It's unlawful to provide alcohol to people under 21. It is unlawful to be a registered gun owner and not secure it. So I think when we think about all the things that we do to support keeping our students safe, talking about safe gun storage fits with what we're already doing. And I agree with Don, if we can keep one gun out of the hands of a student who wants to hurt themselves or others, it will be worth it.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation. It gives me good direction for moving forward with the other superintendents and some of the other law enforcement agencies. So look for some concrete proposal in the next few months.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. We have a number of personnel items. Does anyone have any questions or concerns, comments about that?
I do. Are we in the practice of doing exit interviews for resignations?
Not all the time, no.
Okay, that's okay.
Yep.
I was just curious if that was a practice. I noticed that one of the resignations is for a new teacher who had only been with us for a semester, which is fine. You know, resignations are to be
I-
expected.
Yeah, I did meet with him for a while. Yeah.
And just
Yep.
because I think we, as an employer,
Mhm.
we take a lot of pride in being an
Mhm.
employer of choice. And if there's feedback to be gained for somebody who was with us only for one semester, it
Yep.
may have nothing to do with the district.
Mhm.
But when we can get that gift of feedback
Yep.
from people on their way out, I was just curious if we were
Yeah, so
doing that.
most of the time I get initial feedback and then sometimes I dive in a little bit more. And so sometimes I do have longer discussions with people.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good question. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. The board policies for a second reading, unless somebody has something, one of them that you want to discuss in further depth. I think we've reviewed them already. Anyone have any one of these that we want to draw our attention to?
I think there were a couple things from the ones and those changes were made. Not many on the.
We all good?
Yeah, I didn't have any further questions on the second reading items.
Okay.
Hold on, wait.
The second reading items, Don? Take your
Yeah,
time
know.
because
Second-
you're
Yeah.
always very good. at-
Well, there were a couple changes, minor changes. We were.
Second reading 4165, awareness and prevention of child sexual abuse and
Right.
grooming behaviors.
I was gonna ask that one. Didn't something new just get
Correct.
even after
So
this was updated?
What it says is that if this policy goes, it went into effect already.
Mhm.
So we have until January 30th to train all of our employees. But also in board policy 510 or 5100, it says that you have until 2023 to comply. My question is, do those two things conflict with one another? Do they agree with one another? Do we have 3 weeks to train all of our staff on awareness and prevention of child sexual abuse and grooming behaviors, or do we have until 2023?
So we actually already included that in our training. And so all of our new staff were provided that in August and everybody else is on a cycle. So we did have that already in there. So so it's in our cycle of the training, online training that all of our staff does. And I checked that again today. We use a company called Public School Works. And so all of our new online training.
Right.
And then when they complete the training, then they finish up and take a test at the end.
Right.
And the law change was to take effect in 2023, as I recall.
So
The
the
requirement,
one,
correct?
Well, there's one requirement
Right.
that went in January 1st.
correct.
That was the expanded definition of grooming, I
Right.
believe.
Yes.
But the training part I thought was,
So in
2020.
staff development, policy 5100 says that they have to be trained by 2023. And then it's either annual or every other year. But I couldn't establish whether those two were in conflict with each other or whether they had just forgotten to say 2023 in board policy 4165. So. And it sounds like
I
our
think
hearts
that-
are in the right place. We've already done some training.
I think this is a more expanded one for 2023 that we're waiting on guidance from the state on. But let me check on that.
Okay. I just,
So now you see what you're saying.
I don't want to be
and
non-compliant.
Yeah, no, and yeah,
And my guess is we're not going to be non-compliant. It's just,
Ensure.
It's confusing.
You're talking about faith.
Yeah.
yeah, because Faith's Law,
It's an expanded.
ISB hasn't even created the
There is, yes,
Break
and that
down.
one, ISB has to create one, and that has not been created yet.
Prince, you're saying it like 4 days ago.
I know, I was gonna say it was just signed.
Yeah.
I didn't write the whole thing down, so I mean, you'll check on it.
Yes, I will. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a feeling these will have some changes coming up anyway, just based on whatever ISB comes up with for Faithful.
And
Oh,
then
that's all
5185. Family medical leave.
Yeah, so our family medical leave, the reason so you asked me about the start date and end date. And so our start and end date actually coincides with our insurance start and end dates. So you can pick, so some people use their fiscal years. So July 1 through end of June, for their FMLA or rolling one, but ours is just aligned and has been aligned for years with the insurance dates for FMLA.
So then my question is, does it matter? Like, would anybody get caught
No, nobody would.
for 13 days or whatever?
No.
Okay. And then 5250. That's the leaves of absence. So there's two different board policies, 5250 leaves of
Mhm.
absence board policy, and then another one that says 5330 sick days, vacation, holidays, and leaves. So there's leaves are addressed twice in two different policies.
So one of them is for our professional certified staff and one is for our ESP. And when you go into press online for us, there's two like bookmarks that you click on
Mhm.
and one drops down then for the leaves for certified staff and one drops down for ESP. It's not in the title, but it's in the heading from before that.
Okay. I assume that that's what that was
Yeah.
because
Yes.
if you read the policy.
So yeah,
one
if
is
you
for
just print out
ESP.
the paper copies, you don't have the heading above it.
Okay, so does that matter?
No,
It's fine the way it is.
yeah.
Okay, and then I'm done.
Don, you're always the best at combing through those policies.
Hey, he helps to make sure we get things correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
am
it's
very thorough.
fantastic.
Very thorough. Okay, so we're good for the list of second reading. Now, Don, you have anything for the first reading?
I do have a couple of
Mhm.
yes.
That's good.
This goes out to whoever, board policy 650 work wellness. Every 3 years, the superintendent shall provide implementation data and or reports to the board. I'm just wondering, I don't remember seeing something like that since I've been here and it's, 3 years in. But it may be that you've done it and I just didn't recognize that that's what this was. So the question is, how did we comply with that in the last 3 years?
Yeah, so this would be on the student wellness, so sports 650 on school wellness.
Right.
And so looking at that, I would have to go back and see when the last time we had presented on that.
And this is first reading, so we have plenty of time to
Yeah.
establish that. Then
So
board
again,
policy.
sort of, as we were talking about before, what kind of metrics would
Right.
we want for,
Yeah,
how
what-
have we received evidence of that in the past and how do we want to receive it in the future?
Right. Then 660 curriculum content. In grades 9 through 12, this is what paragraph or number 3.
Mhm.
Grades 9 through 12, provided it can be funded by private grants or federal government, violence prevention and conflict resolution must be stressed. So I'm wondering, do we do that in our curriculum? 1, and then 2, why in the world would it say if it can be funded by private or federal? Like, if it's important, we should be doing it, regardless of whether or not it's being paid for by grants. So
So Rita's not here, but I believe that we are doing that in our PE and health classes already. And the wording, so that wording was already in there in our current one. And I don't know why. And I tried to look back at their notes press to see if you had to make it optional or leave it in, but that's the way they wrote it. So
does it matter to us? Like, would we do this regardless of whether, or regardless of how it was being funded?
Sounds like we are.
Yes,
Because if
Yes.
that's the case, then let's just strike that line.
we can do that. You can just take out the provided it can be funded by private grants or
Mhm,
federal
yeah.
government.
Was that wording from press?
That's right from press.
Yeah.
That's
Right from
actually
press.
that's what's been in our policy too.
Well, I
For
can
years.
certainly philosophically, taking a 30,000-foot view, understand wanting to avoid having to implement endless unfunded mandates.
Right,
So
right.
that's probably where that language came from, but I also think in this case, it makes sense to
Right.
strike it.
Board policy 660 curriculum content, number 13. It says, beginning in the fall of 2022, grades 9 through 12, a unit of instruction on media literacy that includes, and it's a gigantic list of stuff that should have been happening in every building across the country since computers were invented.
Hmm.
So my only comment is, wahoo.
And I can tell you from my own students' experience, it has been already implemented in the district.
Yeah.
Certainly expanding it would be welcome, of course.
Well, any teacher that does research projects has to show students how to be able to vet information, know how to find credible sources. I mean, essentially, that's what this is, but let's establish the difference between fact and craziness. So I'm happy that that's gone in there. 770, attendance and truancy.
I actually have a question on the previous policy
Oh.
that I had noted.
Here, I was just going along.
Okay, sorry. Don't want to stop your train from rolling, but, so there's the sections, I would say, between the newly appointed 16 on down. There's a lot of discussion about various groups, and you know, their stories and struggles and histories being taught and shared. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I looked this over several times. I did not see anything related to Native American history, struggles. Nearly every other group or, you know, well, any other group was represented, but not Native Americans. I thought that was an odd exclusion.
Yeah.
And possibly just an oversight.
Is it somewhere else?
I
That's
looked
what
it
I-
over
that's what I
several
got.
times, so unless someone saw it and I just was poorly reading today, which I would not put past myself, but.
Isn't there a mandate that we
I thought
have something like that?
We
It-
did review
I bet it's
something.
something. I
where
bet it's someplace else.
I don't know this for certain, and I didn't catch that, so thank you, but there's something telling me that it's already somewhere.
It may also be part of middle school policy, but I don't see why. I don't know, it
Would-
seems like an odd exclusion, like I said, at the high school level.
Yeah, and it's,
Yep.
and our policies are not specific to high school. So these are pretty generic
Oh, okay.
policies that are used both elementary, K through 12. So if it's in there, it's,
You mean the press updates?
yeah, the press
The
update.
press.
We
update,
can
yeah.
follow up. Rita can take a
Yeah.
deeper
Okay.
dive
Yeah.
into this. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
bringing it to our
Oh, sure.
attention.
It's got to be in there somewhere.
Should I,
No, please continue.
okay.
Back to you, John.
770, attendance and truancy.
Mhm.
This is the third paragraph. The last sentence says students absent for a valid cause may make up missed homework and classwork assignments in a reasonable time frame. My question is, what do we think about that? What does that sentence mean by putting it in there? Are we saying that if a student doesn't have a valid excuse, that they can't make up work?
So the way it's written right now in our handbook for if a student is unexcused, he or she is responsible for the daily work, but the grades then will be determined by the teacher. So that's
Okay.
for our unexcused and truant students.
Which that makes sense to me. I just don't understand why that sentence is in there.
The new one they're adding in there.
Right.
So the press said the reason is they added in other reasons that were like a valid reason, and they wanted some all-encompassing reasons, and that was their overarching.
Okay,
Are you saying why that language or why that idea, that concept?
why that concept? Why that idea?
It's also covered like currently like in Illinois school
Right,
code,
I was just gonna say, I
and
think
so
it
then
might be going back
adding
to
it
code.
into the policy.
Okay, so I just wonder then, does that mean that if the kid skips class, they just made a bad decision one day, does that necessarily mean that they can't make that work up? Now, I know that this doesn't have anything to do with that. It's not
Mhm.
addressing that. But does it set a philosophical precedent is all I'm saying.
So if they just skip a day and it's an unexcused, we want that student to be able to progress and keep learning. So
Right.
they're going to be responsible for that daily work. Whether or not their grade is determined would be left up to the teacher then.
I think what I'm familiar with is trying to make sure that student rights. So if I'm absent, but it was for good reason, I
Right.
still have the right to have my learning measured and contributed in however that teacher is measuring my learning. Because I think in some instances that hasn't been past practice in some districts, or individual teachers feel they can deduct points or do whatever kind of punitive grading practices for a student being absent, even if it was excused. And so I think
So this goes
school, I
to
think
the
it's
larger
to a larger
question of
issue.
what is grading?
What do students,
is-
right? What do students have a right to
Right.
produce evidence of their learning, even if they were absent? Is how I see it. Now, if they're not excused, I think that's again where individual districts and individual teachers can say, what do we believe about the way we're going to commingle grades and responses to student misconduct. Some still allow them to be connected, and other districts have disconnected them, saying, yes, you're going to have a consequence for skipping school, but it might not be that your grade is going to be lowered. There'll be a different consequence for that.
Right, and that's the philosophical that's coming.
Correct.
Then the last one was, oh, no, but
I have one for 780. The 5-day heads up kind of seems, this may not be the right word, but arbitrary. And I know with certain minority religions, holidays don't always fall at the same time each year, the same month each year. Sometimes they can sneak up. It has been my experience, both as a teacher and a student. And kind of circles back to what Don's talking about. But if you take a religious holiday as a student, didn't give the proper notification of at least 5 days, is there any scenario in which that's an unexcused absence? Is there any scenario in which something happens, consequentially because of that, related to grading and or academic opportunities or otherwise? In many cases, kids,
I think knowing our staff and knowing both our schools, I think they would be, they're not going to be like, hey, this 4 days, I'm sorry, you didn't
Okay.
meet the 5-day requirement.
But-
And they'd be
then-
willing to work
Right,
with
But
that.
then let's customize our policy to not say must give written notice. Maybe we could suggest 5-day notice. But I think philosophically, it would be inconsistent with our current practice to say, oh, that, you know, you only gave 4 days notice, we don't have to honor.
I mean, you could change the word from must to
Must.
should.
Well, I still
Or
think
it's
we'll-
recommended or
Requested.
Yeah.
just also viewing this from an equity standpoint. Sometimes to a certain degree, this stuff falls on the students' shoulders to kind of remind, you know, you have to consider the various types of families there are and where responsibilities may fall and who's managing calendars and who's managing academics. And I can think of several.
I think,
We
I
all
think,
can,
I
right?
think the only pushback would be, you know, if you do have somebody that is gonna be out, that for teachers to prepare some things
Right.
while they're gone. I mean, you don't, so you don't want to say, hey, just the day before. I mean, if we wanted to reduce it, I would, you know, you could say, hey, 3 days notice or,
How
you
do
know,
teachers feel about that? I mean,
honestly, I
it's a
don't,
religious holiday and they do know it's coming.
yeah.
And these are high school kids that there does have to be some accountability
Mhm.
on their part for when they miss something. And if the teacher requires a certain period of notice to prepare something for them, then I think that we should give the teachers that time.
You know, I was trying to look to see what we have, like if somebody knows they're doing a, you know, college visit or pre-arranged absence, kind of what our,
No.
what we notif, you know, try to line that up with it, you know.
I think it's more than anything, it's the wording, the must give written notice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It seems just, it lacks tolerance for some reason.
Because yeah, this is really talking about making up on the back end. It's not saying that the teacher is required to prepare before the absence work for them to take, because really, if it's a
That's
religious
supposed to be
holiday,
doing
they're not going to be working on homework and assignments and projects during that holiday. So this is really talking about making up, providing a student with the equivalent opportunity to make up exam study or work requirement. So I'm not sure it puts any undue pressure on teachers to soften that wording from must give 5 days notice.
Because in the prior policy, if it is an excused absence, which religious observances are, they do have the right to make it up. So it's, I just want them to be aligned. Like one is saying you have to have written notice for it and the other is saying, no, if it's excused,
what
you
if
can
you
do
just-
it. And so.
What if you just got rid of it?
Mhm.
Or if you don't want to get rid of it, just put a period after principal.
Well, and we don't require excused absences for any other reason to be given notice to the building principal. There's a different procedure for that in our buildings
Mhm.
anyway. So to say for a religious holiday, you have to give written notice to building principal is a whole different protocol than what we have for any other kind of excused absence.
To Brian's point, though, what do we do for like college visits and things like that where it's? an
So
excused
we don't
absence?
have a day time. I was looking in our handbook and we say, you know, examples of prearranged absence include college visits, religious holidays, family wedding, funeral, school-related field trip, etc. So
And prearranged means contacting the principal or contacting,
they would contact their LST to get a form and then they go to their teachers to, you know,
What is the
whatever.
normal protocol for
Mhm.
excused absences? It
so
would
maybe
seem
this
to me
should
to
be,
make
maybe this should reflect that.
Yeah, I think that it should be the same protocol for any other excused absence. It shouldn't be a separate procedure.
Doesn't it already say religious absences in that process of where they have to go to their LST and get a form and so are we
Yeah, I wonder if we need a,
duplicating something here?
yeah, I wonder if we
or
need a
redundant?
separate policy
we're
then.
making.
Well, so we have to have this policy.
I was gonna say, I
Yeah.
So
highly
it's-
recommend we
So
have. this
this,
policy.
so this policy is dictated by.
So we have to have it, but we can customize the wording a little bit to reflect our current practices.
Correct. But yeah, state and federal law says we have to have this separate policy
Okay.
specifically.
Okay.
And the good news, this is the first reading, so
Yes.
we can tweak it a little bit.
Are there any other policies people have questions or comments on for first reading?
Just a comment, 7190 under student behavior. Thank you for putting hyperlinks in the other ones. Because there were several that you had included hyperlinks in all the
Mhm.
second reading stuff that we're going to accept. But we could put a student handbook link on the bottom of page 6 for 7190.
Okay. Sorry, missed that one.
And then 7240, just a general question again. This is the code of conduct for participants in extracurricular activities. First paragraph, last sentence says, the conduct code shall be reviewed by the building principal or designee periodically at their discretion and presented to the Board of Education. So this is similar to the other question. When did that happen? When does that happen? Has it happened recently?
So
What does it look like? What are the metrics?
Sure. So, one of the things, obviously, both of our buildings, our athletic director, assistant principals, they're the ones in charge of running the code of conducts and having the meeting. And, I get feedback from them every year about it. Now, formally, the last time we met as a committee to look at it was like 5 years ago when we're ready to do that again. My hope was to try to get that this year still. And then I don't know if I formally ever brought it to the, board, but we can do that and add that into, I can add board policy 7240 into our list that we, kind of pull some of the policies out separately. And maybe every other year, add that into the rotation.
But I think you'd be asking almost like for the results, how many students? I'm accustomed to reporting to the board that outcomes of this particular policy. There were
Right.
18 students who had this kind of violation in lieu of suspension. They had drug and alcohol treatment, or they had whatever. And so it's sort of talking about how the implementation of this policy is supporting students. Is
Right.
an idea of, again, that metrics back to the board. How are these policies playing out for kids?
Do you have experience with this policy?
I have experience reporting this policy to boards. Yes.
So I will defer to your guidance. I don't have anything else. I know it saddens you, but
Okay, anyone else have comments for the first reading policies? We will see these again next month then. Okay, moving on. We have flexible schedule for second semester on the agenda. Yeah.
thank you. This intrigues me.
So we didn't put this in the packet, this information, but I want to share with you in paper here. So back in the fall, we did a thought exchange with our staff. And we are, one of the things with our thought exchange, some of the feedback that we received was trying to incorporate some time in the day for both our students and our teachers to be able to work with each other, students and teachers, for teachers to work with other teachers and their colleagues, and for students also to look at reassessments and time for that. So one of the things that we are looking to do is to put a flexible schedule. We're calling it a flexible schedule to incorporate 1 day per week on Wednesdays. And that would be starting the week of January 24th. And so that office flex time would try to incorporate into a day, but also one of the things we wanted to look at was not to lose a lot of instructional time. And so our normal class periods are 45 minutes long. And so by reducing each of the class periods by 5 minutes, we were able to gain some time back. Also, because Wednesday is normally a PLC and a building administration day for us, by incorporating the PLC time and going right into office flex time, there was always a time on Wednesdays that it was PLC, kind of a time for teachers then to move in their classroom and get ready to teach. What we're doing is taking the PLC time right into office flex time, which then we're able to maximize that office flex time to 55 minutes during the day. So again, we're trying to maximize the amount of instructional time during the day, but also try to maximize amount of time for our students to be able to meet with teachers. So our buses on Wednesdays would run the regular time. And so our students will still come to school if they're riding the bus at the regular time. During that time, they can set up appointments to meet with teachers. All of our resource areas and common areas will be open. So if a student just wants to come and go to their Chromebook and get some work done in the morning before they go to class, they still have that opportunity. If they drive themselves or their parents are able to, and they want to come to school, for first period at 9:30, it's just a little later than normal. So it's 45 minutes later than normal, and they get a little bit, extra time. But really, we really wanted to focus on the amount of time that they could get with, some of our staff and reassessments in our testing centers. We looked at a lot of different options. We looked at different days of the week, but by putting it back to back with the PLC time with teachers, and it really was able to maximize that time. We looked at end of the day. Our worry was end of the day that people, students, especially classes over, school's over, I'm going to athletics or I'm going home, and we just thought, here's a time that it's not too early also, because it is 8:30. And that's why the buses would get here and have those students here in time. So, we looked at even earlier, but we didn't want to do it too early because that limits the amount of students. So the other piece of this is that it is in our union contract with our teachers, our bell schedule. So we've been working closely with the union, and we would have to put a memorandum of agreement in with the union. And we're working on that. And then that is something that we would bring to the January board meeting to approve the MOA. But we wanted to obviously bring it to you tonight too.
Just to add that this would be for second semester only.
Yep.
That we see this in response to, again, all the things that we're trying to do from what we learned last year when teachers had Wednesdays as flexible time. So again, teachers became accustomed to being able to meet one-on-one or in small groups with students to do some of that retesting. And we're trying to carry some of those good practices over, but with much more restricted schedules. So the idea of calling this flex really is that flexible for teachers, flexible for students, but the focus still on maximizing and learning time for everybody.
And can you highlight the ways that this is a benefit to students?
Well, Brian did quite a bit, but I would just add, I think when we talk with students about the idea of having opportunities to reassess, they appreciate that, because if I get some feedback and I have an opportunity, but to try and make that before or after school or during their lunch can be difficult. Or if I want to try and do a study session with my teacher and I don't happen to have the same study hall or lunch period as them, and I'm an athlete, it really restricts students' time to be able to meet with a teacher or meet with a group if they're doing a group project. So from students report how they use Wednesdays before was their own study groups. I imagine this library being filled with students working individually and in small groups on projects or homework. I imagine the resource centers being filled. I imagine the testing center being very busy, maybe even expanding it. I know in other areas other schools who have times like this, it is a very popular time for students to make up missed work or exams without having to impinge on receiving real instruction for the next unit.
And do you think it makes sense to, if this is implemented and we roll out the communication about this, does it make sense to help students understand how to use this time to their advantage, to either address learning loss, to get with their teachers to get extra help, to have built-in time to work on group projects?
Yes.
I think that, philosophically it makes sense, but sometimes I know for my students, sometimes really spelling out how to use this
Here are
time to
your
their
choices.
advantage,
Here's your menu
Right,
on how
this-
you can best use your time.
as opposed to awesome, I drive so I can sleep an extra 45 minutes. Okay, well, maybe you can.
Some weeks that
but
might
that
be
might
the
be
best
true.
choice. Other weeks you have something you need to catch up on.
But if you have a
or you're
parent-
starting to get behind on this project, right?
Exactly. And if you have a parent who's concerned about catching up or learning loss or redos and retakes, making sure that that communication is really easy to have of what the expectation for how students can benefit from this time might be really, really helpful.
That's great.
So you indicate this is second semester only, but is this something we'll reassess at the end of the semester for a possible continuation?
Definitely. I think that right now we do have a joint committee of administrators working with a union group to look at a more flexible schedule for the future. And I know this is one possible component that they're thinking about. So not only might it be for this semester, but then that committee would use this data and last year's positive feedback we received about flexible Wednesdays in potentially bringing a new schedule forward for adoption in the future.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I just didn't want anyone to get the impression that, oh, this is just a stopgap measure to help learning loss. And once we're done with the semester, that it's going away. But I agree with it. I think it'll be beneficial to a lot of students.
I can see where you have like freshman students, especially in the first semester, that have some adjustments to, high school, or for the other students who've had summer off. I can almost see that this being more beneficial even in the first semester. Just for people to sort of come up and get into a rhythm of things. But I think something, Lisa, you said it will be useful to also educate parents on here's how your kids can use this time. So another sort of parent education opportunity here.
Yeah, so I think, there's two pieces of communication. We can try to start communicating this out to our staff and to parents initially about this change. But then I think follow-up communication as we get maybe closer to that week. Hey, a reminder, here is, our first Wednesday. Here are some things that, you as students can do. Parents, here are some things that, your students can do. And I think, putting some of that together, like a couple of days before that first one, we can send out general information now and then do more follow-up right when it's coming up, and maybe, even do reminders, as, we kind of go along.
So
Like
if a student doesn't need to connect with their teacher, where will they be channeled during that time?
So they can come to a library, they can come to any of our resource areas, MASH. We'll have somebody in the MASH. For some of like math help we'll have, and some of our resource areas that we have some people helping before school. They can go to the cafeteria. So we have, the common area, especially somebody that is riding a bus.
Right.
You know, they don't have to sit outside or anything. We'll have places for them to be able to come and
I don't
sit
live
and-
that far. They can
Yeah,
just.
and get on their,
Out of Rooney.
get on their computer, so.
Okay.
Coffee
I-
with
I-
Casey.
Well, yeah, go
Coffee with
ahead.
Casey. right?
Yeah.
I support students having a consistent time to connect with their teachers. I do have one question,
Mhm.
and Bryant, you're gonna have to refresh my memory. Last year, this year, one of the years, we tightened up that passing period time. So we took away some instructional time then.
No, it's always been
No,
5.
we
So
did
one of the schedules when we were
did
looking at
something with it.
having the kids come back into the building during hybrid.
No, this was, I think this is pre-pandemic. I'd have to look at it. I want to make sure we're focused on not always taking instructional time away.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to like my AP kids and even that 5
Mhm.
minutes, it does make a difference.
Mhm.
And keeping an eye on that. I fully support this concept, especially as kids are trying to recover some of their learning losses in the last year and really get back up to speed. But I do want to keep an eye on making sure we're not consistently taking time away out of the classroom.
I know in the past we had discussed looking at like 4 minutes passing period. The problem was that like looking at both buildings, there's times that, you know, kids are just making it, you know, in the 5, depending like if they're coming, which end of the building here especially.
Oh, yeah, I
Or,
had kids like that.
yeah,
They were
or
running.
coming from, you know, the physical education classes where they're coming out of locker room. So we had looked at that, I think, years ago, but just kept it at 5.
Yeah.
I had another question. I didn't want to jump back in if,
I do.
yeah, please.
You have a
Me?
question? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, since we're being creative with the time and thinking out of the box, and one of our priorities is social emotional, I think we do have a large constituency of students that might not benefit for routine weekly catching up with individual students, but are we thinking about how we might be able to catch some of those kids that are falling under the radar who do not have that social connect? You know, I can see a lot of students saying, I'm just not coming to school until 9:30. And we've kind of lost an opportunity to try to reach out, even though they don't have the academic need for the social emotional component.
I definitely know members of the LST will be looking at this as an opportunity to run some additional groups or to do some work with students who might have a full, you know, course load and not have access to spend as much time with a social worker or a school counselor. So this definitely would be another opportunity for those services to be delivered to students.
My question is, we're working cooperatively with the teachers union. I'm guessing that as a classroom teacher, anytime you try to take time away from me, that's a hard no. But the utilization of this time and allowing teachers to use that, they're good with this.
Mhm.
Because I could see how that would benefit.
Will we have a way to track how many kids are actually coming in and utilizing this time effectively?
It's a great question.
That's kind of what I was gonna ask, is it'd be interesting to get some kind of, how is this time being utilized after a couple of weeks or months, once or twice?
In this model, we are not trying to count it as instructional time. So that we're not requiring all kids to be here. And so that's why we're calling it flex time. In other models where this is maybe in between periods 2 or 3, schools do count it as instructional time. It's just flexible instructional time, and kids check in wherever they go and attendance is taken. That's a different model. That's not the model we felt ready to launch second semester now. But that also gives a lot more accountability for the whole system, and it allows you to track where kids are going and the kind of help that they're receiving. If they are going to a group with a social worker, if they are checking in for math help, if they are checking into the library to do independent study, there's a way that you can easily make sure you're taking attendance and you know where kids are going, where their feet tell you what kind of needs they're expressing that they need. So I think that we could do things like taking attendance at all of the resource areas, not like signing in, but even just doing counts. Okay, there were 82
Yeah.
kids in the library this Wednesday morning. And just seeing where are kids going? Do we have enough to supervise? Are there enough resources for the kind of help that they're needing? And make some adjustments along the way.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to see some numbers that say that this is an effective use of time. Because if it's not being used, then we need to look at some adjustments.
Well, if the buses are empty on Wednesday, I'll tell you.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, the rescheduled EdRed legislative meeting. And I'll just make a quick comment. Normally, if you recall, and for the new board members, the January board meeting typically conflicted with the EdRed legislative meeting, which we often, a large number of us, both administrators and board members, would attend. And this year, ironically, it didn't. It's always the last Monday of the month, which is often the fourth Monday of the month, which is when our board meeting is. On those months, on those Januaries, we would move our board meeting to Tuesday so that we have the opportunity to participate in this, what is the major meeting for this group that we've participated with for decades, as far as I know. They had it originally scheduled the last Monday of January, and they've now postponed that due to increase in numbers of the COVID diagnosis, and to accommodate some of the legislators' meeting schedules and whatnot and their preference. So this is moving to
April 25th.
April, which does conflict with our April meeting. So I guess the question is there anyone that would have a concern if we moved our April board meeting to Tuesday for that month, just as we normally do in January, to accommodate this meeting?
I will have a conflict that evening.
Okay.
Every Tuesday I have a conflict. So, but
Is there another day that week? I guess we've done it to Tuesday, but I would want it to try and maximize all board
No.
members being present if we could.
if possible, great, but there's a possibility I could work around it as well.
Okay.
I would just have to get the wheels in motion.
Yeah, because right now I'm open any day that week, so.
Yes, would either be Tuesday, the 26th
26.
or Wednesday, the 27th could also work, I think.
I would prefer the 27th if possible, but I could make the 26th work if that is best for the admin and everybody else.
I can do either.
As of now, I can do both.
Yeah, I don't see a conflict at this particular point in time.
I would be okay with the 27th if you want to take that back and see
Yep.
what.
I
the
will take
team
that back.
that
Carol
has
and
to-
I will check all of the other building calendars and making sure
Yeah.
there's not an accidental conflict with some major thing happening
But
either at one of
whichever-
the schools.
But whichever date you bring back, we can vote on that
At
in
the-
2 weeks.
yes.
Yeah, yeah,
We
Okay.
can do that.
Thank you for the flexibility.
yeah. No problem. Thank you. Any future agenda items you want to discuss right now?
The only last thing that Rita got some information this afternoon on our Special Olympics, individuals that qualified for the state winter games. And so this would be an educational tour that we could still bring it in January, but it is scheduled for Galena, February 1st through the 3rd. And we have 3 athletes that'll be attending. So she just wanted to ask, kind of bring it to you guys, because we're going to start planning a little bit and make sure that's okay, because the January board meeting is right before that week, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Appreciate the heads up.
Yeah.
yep,
And then one other future agenda
Sure.
item, we're gonna be looking at some software for superintendent evaluations. The rep is gonna demo that, and then are going to bring back recommendations. If we think that would be something for the board to consider, we'll discuss it at the next committee meeting. Field any questions, give information. If we decide it's something that we're really not crazy about, you probably won't hear anything because we'll probably pursue other vendors. But Denise has done some really good research, and we're going to get a demo on a software tool that Lake Bluff is using. That seems like it could perhaps be a good fit for us moving our evaluation process forward. So
Yeah, that's good.
And my question is, when do we expect to get updates on the strategic planning work that you guys are doing?
Yes, we did the survey and we got the raw results back. We'll be analyzing that. And then we also have the second semester schedule. So I'll be able to give an update on both of those things at our January 24th meeting.
thanks.
Anything
And
else?
when is the next strategic planning meeting? January 21st?
21st, yes.
Anything else? Okay, we'll call the Program and Personnel Committee adjourned. Do we need a break or move right into facilities and finance?
5-minute break. Does everybody? Okay,
Okay, 5 minutes?
all right. Sure.
Sounds good.
So we'll be back here at 7 after.
Mhm.
Eli, you ready?
All righty.
Applesauce.
Excuse me.
Things people never say to me. All righty. Let's call to order the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, January 10th. It is 7:08 PM. Are we good? Quick review of the agenda. We'll have public comment, review of the December committee meeting minutes, capital projects update, bills payable, check releases for December, D128 Sustainability Committee meeting update, approval of bids and contracts, none of those, but we do have some upcoming bids and contracts to discuss. No disposal of obsolete equipment. And then the mid-year financial review under future agenda items, as well as any other future agenda items that come up. So let's go ahead and invite anyone from the public that would like to speak. Please join us.
So I don't know, this is my first time here, this layout.
Yep, that's your microphone right there. If you could tell us your name and
Socrates Vela, Vernon Hills, 8 Altoona Court. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Herman. Last time I was here, I had asked a response from her. And I just want to let all you know that she got right back to me. I was not aware of the personal situation that she was juggling with. So I appreciate the email you sent me. It's very long. I haven't gone through the whole thing yet, but I plan to get back to you on some thoughts. I also want to thank, I don't know who decided to have the children go back in, today. I want to say thank you. Because as you know, CPS, obviously, they feel otherwise. And there's a few, neighboring school districts that have, and I just want to say thank you. You guys, I don't know how you came down with that. And as a parent of 2 children, I have a freshman and a sophomore, and I just want to, really appreciate it. And that's all I have.
thank you. Mary, is there any written public comment?
There is not.
Okay. Moving on, a review of December committee minutes. Any comments? Any questions? No? Okay. Capital projects update. I'll turn that over to Mark.
Actually, Dan is going to start.
Or Dan.
Hello, is that better? Sorry, keep bumping it. So here. Wow. It's a small monitor. Hold on. Smaller.
It's gigantor.
My gosh. Give me 1 second. There we go.
There we go.
All right, and then I'm going to share this so that it can be on the Zoom. Is that good, Eli? All right. Sorry about that. So what we have attached for you is our long-term capital plan. So you and previous boards have asked to see this for a long time now. So I'm sorry that it's coming at this late of hour, but here we are. What I've given you is some summary sheets so you can see the highest level view. And then as you go down more pages, you see more detail, similar to how we do financial reports, summary at the high level and then more detail. I've also sent you an actual Excel spreadsheet because there are specific notes in columns and you can see very detailed information for what you're looking for. So that information is available for you as well. So I'm going to walk through this presentation to kind of explain some things. So here's what I want to walk through. I want to walk through how this is developed. I want to explain the structure, how it's set up so that we're understand how to read it. I'm going to give you a snapshot of some components because there's a million things in here. I can't go through everything. It's not going to serve our purposes, but I'll give you some highlights. Then I'll show you what the summary is really for the next 5 years. So we've talked before. Part of the reason why it was delayed is, we've kind of been, it's a 10-year plan, it's a 10-year plan. This actually is going out to 2050. So it's more than a 10-year plan, but we're really focusing on the 10 years, but we needed to kind of meaning if we did something last year and it's supposed to last 20 years, let's make sure we have a spot to put it out 20 years from now. Also because, I wanted to at least have something here for when I'm targeting to retire. We're going to talk about an elephant in the room. There's not enough money to do everything that everybody would like to do. Okay, that money is a scarce resource. We're no exception to that. And so with that, we're going to have a process and prioritization. So let me walk through the development. How is this really developed? I mean, the biggest portion of this, which is our maintenance replacement cycle, is developed by Mark's team. So Mark with his B&G leadership team, but also our consultants. So we have architects, we have building engineering consultants, we've got building envelope consultants that's outside of buildings. We have consultants for all kinds of things. And so they really, with Mark's expertise and them, work together to put a lot of those big things in place. And then our building departments and building leadership submit requests. Sometimes they're doubling, like somebody notices, oh, we should, I don't know, something might need, or the turf, right? Or, man, when is the turf, we think the turf should get replaced. Well, Mark may already have that on this list. So sometimes there's things that happily show up on both lists. And so then the buildings will submit that to us. And so Mark and I will review that. And then there are times when we feel something is not ready to move forward, or we don't know that that's ever going to move forward to the next step. And so we kind of filter from there to get it onto this list. So everything that you're seeing on this list is something that at least we've all looked at and believe that it's something worth exploring. The question is when, because there's a scarce amount of resources. So in here is a lot of numbers. So where do we come up with these numbers? Pretty much all of them involved working with the different consultants we have. A lot of it really comes down to a price per square foot, depending on what you're doing, whether it's roofing or a room renovation, it starts there. And some of those prices per square foot can vary a lot depending on the space. So for instance, you could say, I want to redo a classroom. Well, okay, well, we can do a general number, but it depends on what kind of classroom. Is it a math classroom or is it a science classroom? Those are very different. Is it a foods, is it a lab? Is it a foods lab? Is it a chemistry lab? All those different things can make the costs vary quite a bit. And so, but that's the foundational thing into that. It can vary depending on the type of trades that are involved, the type of equipment you're buying. And we also look at current pricing. So if we've just done a project, we bid it out, we know kind of what that is, we can then back that in and build in some escalation to kind of estimate with the consultant's help some numbers in there. In general, I would say that we use conservative estimates. What we mean by that is we guess higher than it probably will end up being, because we don't want to guess the other way and assume it's going to all be cheaper and then everything turns out too expensive and we can't afford it. So that's what we mean. So our estimates will lean on the higher side because really a lot of these things you have to bid and you really don't know until you bid for it. And so we've had times where we have estimates and bids come in higher. We've had times we have estimates, the bid come in lower. It really depends on the market at that time, and the market changes pretty frequently, depending on what you're talking about. So let's talk about the timeline. So primarily we're looking at 10 years. So when you're looking at this list, the next 10 years are in extremely good places. Beyond 10 years, it's definitely more wishy-washy because it does go up to 2050, but there's some placeholders for stuff, but really we're focusing on the 10 years, but our hyper focus is really the next 5, right? So similarly, when we look at financial projections, those are 5-year projections. I usually say like, pretty much ignore whatever it says from 5 years from now. Really what matters is the next 2 or 3 years. What I'm saying is really what matters in this is the next 5 years are critical for that. So it's broken into three different sections. You have our site, which is all the land and the stuff that's not the building itself or not inside the building. So that's going to include things like parking lots, roads, fences, landscaping, fields, turf, water, because water comes into us. That's not necessarily part of the building. So water mains, that kind of a thing. Does that make sense in terms of site? Think of it's outside of the building. It's not the external part of the building. That would still be part of the building. So building, when we're talking about there, you're going to see masonry, so all the bricks on the outside, roofs, HVAC, all kinds of HVAC, classrooms, windows, things like that. These are just examples. It's not comprehensive, but you can in those attachments you can see really the comprehensive list of all of those things. But they generally fit into these categories. And then equipment, those are going to be things like trucks, mowers, tractors, driver's ed vehicles, classroom furniture, things like that. Now, there's three sections. In each of those sections, there's really three different categories. So it's kind of, it can be sorted really kind of two different ways. One is what we're calling the maintenance replacement cycle. So those are the things that we're keeping doing what we're doing. We just need to make sure it's replaced in a timely manner so that it keeps doing what it's meant to be doing. So those would be things like roofs, right? So Vernon Hills, so for example, Vernon Hills, that building is over 20 years old. A proper cycle for that building's roofs needs to start happening. And so that's to have a good cycle, because you don't want to wait for roofs to fail, all that kind of stuff. So what we're saying based on this is when you see maintenance repair, in our opinion, those are must-dos. You have to do them. We highly would recommend not doing them. Now, just because something has a certain number in a certain year on there doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it then. What it will mean is we're going to look extremely closely that year. Does it really need to get done now? Or, excuse me, or does it delay? And then kind of looking at the year before, year after, is there something else that it presents with more urgency? Because in case you'll notice, even at your own home, like some things you thought was going to happen, like, you know what, but really it's my dishwasher that died. I thought, I thought I was going to be okay, but stuff like that. So it's a plan, but it's meant to be fluid and adjustable. The next category of things are called remodels. And so what I have is a separate list. It's really like the last page of the attachment, and it's got a separate tab because none of those things on the remodel, because of what I'll go through, have a specific year tied to them. These are projects that we've talked about, that we've fleshed out some of we've fleshed out extremely a lot. Some we're in the very beginning stages of fleshing them out. That's more in terms of what would you do this space, not necessarily when are we going to do it, because some of that is dependent on when we would have the funding to be able to do it. And then those are new things. They could be additions, new things that we haven't really had before. So for example, the West Gym at Vernon Hills, that was new, right? Wasn't there before. But a different example is the field house, the LHS field house, that was a remodel. All right, does that make sense? If we decided to tear down that building and make a bigger one, that would have been a new category because that's new. Another example of something new is our transition program. That's new to us. We're going to have to outfit that space this year. So like that's another example of new. Those are things that we're not saying we don't believe that we must do. Those are things that we can do. And when I show you the list, I'll walk through and I'll explain kind of what I mean. Because depending on who you are, defining what's a need versus a want can be pretty tricky. So we'll talk through a little bit of that. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple snapshots of this. So if we focus in on site, maintenance and repair. So site, remember outside of the building, it's the grounds area, that kind of stuff. Some of the big ticket stuff that is on that list for the next 3 to 5 years would be the north parking lot, at this building. That's scheduled right now for 2024, $800,000. The Vernon Hills Stadium lot and walkways. So think of up the stadium, that parking lot, the walkways there, 2025, $500,000. Both of the tracks at each building, or track at each building getting replaced in 2025. Those are about $250,000 each. depending on kind of what you go through. You go with something similar, do you go with an upgrade? Those are things that we kind of figure out as we get closer to them. Replacing the water main, the main water main for this building, that would be scheduled for 2026. That'd be about 450,000. And replacing the Vernon Hills Stadium turf in 2027, 600,000. So those are just a few big number things that are like on that list, for example, to kind of show you and explain. And the reason for all of these is the replacement cycle. The parking lot is how old?
This one's actually older. We usually, parking lots are about 20, is a 20-year life expectancy on a parking lot.
Yep. So these are all life cycle replacements for these. The next snapshot I'll give is the building. All right. So now we're going to talk about the building. So think of the walls, the roofs, the actual building itself. Equipment is the stuff in the building, but so we're talking about there. So for example, we've got Vernon Hills roof. So I told you that building is now 20. We need to look at replacing some of the roofs. So starting in 2024, 23, actually in 24, depending on the year, it can range, but call it about 1 to 1.5 million per year for the next about 6 years, totaling about $8.5 to $9 million in total to get all of those roofs replaced. Now, some of these things are big, and so for some of them, you can break them out and do it over chunks, right? You can do this roof, you can do this roof in different years, depending on the situation. The LHS main gym, the HVAC system in that gym needs to be replaced. So we've got that scheduled for 2024, 1.6 million. That is not a low cost thing. It's a kind of unique project that needs additional reinforcement to be able to do what we need to do in that space. Vhs Air Handlers, scheduled in 2025. So if you have been around for a long time, you've kind of heard and you've seen Vernon Hills, new building, nice building, all that, and that's true. However, because of its age at this point, it is starting to need some of those life cycle whatever.
Life cycle replacement.
Thank you. Yeah.
And maintenance.
All right. So similarly, LHS Univents air handlers are slightly different, but LHS has Univents, and those starting in 2024 would be about 625,000 per year. That would take like 5 years to do all of the Univents in the building. The Vernon Hills chiller scheduled in 2025, that'll be about 800,000. And the LHS chillers, we have 2 of them, right? 2 of them at this building for a total of 1.2 million in 2026. So those are big number things that we would have. Now, when this is normally developed, Mark has a budget of about 3 million, sometimes a little bit more. And then throughout the district, we end up 3 to 4 million-ish per year on capital outlay stuff. So that's going to be these kind of projects, these kind of things in there scheduled out.
I'm sorry, did you say those are 2 separate things? The 3 million, you said Mark has about $3 million of a maintenance budget each year.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, so it's roughly, we budget about $3 million a year for maintenance.
Roughly, we budget between 3 and 4 million for capital outlay,
Okay.
which includes all the stuff that Mark does and then all of the equipment we do. So think driver's ed cars, trucks, tractors, and then other stuff in different departments. So those are some snapshots of things that are on the schedule and the maintenance repair cycle. Now, this is our remodel list. None of these have been assigned a year, so they're not in any of the years that you could reference, but this is the list because, as we'll talk about, there's not enough money to do all of this. So, but let me just kind of walk through this list so you can understand. So a couple years ago, Vernon Hills renovated a couple science labs. What they would like to do is finish renovating them. They have 4 left. And so that would be about $200,000 each lab, so 800,000 total. LHS has 10 science labs that we would be about 300,000 to replace. Now, those are a little bit more involved than the ones here because they have Univents involved. There's HVAC issues, so it's more tricky and it's more expensive. The science lab is this building versus Vernon Hills. Bathrooms. So one of the items that we've looked at for that we believe for this building is the bathrooms. If you've been in the bathrooms, so this is a great example of they work. You wouldn't necessarily put a bathroom on a replacement cycle. If a toilet breaks, you replace the toilet, but the bathrooms are kind of there. They're not optimal, right? If you've walked into some of them, they're really, really dated, but they still function. They do right what bathrooms need to do. It's not a super pleasant experience. So a lot of these things are, they function right now, but we believe they could be optimized. Vernon Hills, it's not exactly 30, but it's somewhere around there. Also, we'll start needing their bathrooms, but not really until 2030. So if you think of like a 10-year plan, these would not be until further down the road. But because they're part of the 10-year plan, that would be included. The
There's
LHS,
Can I interrupt there?
yes.
There's a significant difference between the bathrooms in LHS and the bathrooms in Vernon Hills, because the bathrooms in LHS, we've discovered surprises. Asbestos rat pipes behind the walls, and like, we don't know what we're gonna get when we do a bathroom here.
Correct. What else I would say is I don't believe it's really ever been on the list to look at remodeling the bathrooms in this building. But we believe it is worth looking at and pursuing when possible. So that's the best I could say. My honest opinion is it'd been nice if they'd been remodeled like some time ago, but here we are.
But
Right.
Don, are you questioning the same price for the two?
Yeah.
The estimate, like,
Yeah, I would
should we
think that the
realistically
estimate would be
say
higher.
the bathrooms at LHS shouldn't be 125,000 each, that it might be more?
I don't know. I don't know what you would say in terms of.
I see what John's saying to you. We got put in as with escalation and bringing Vernon Hills in several years down the line. That number was, meant to go at a later date, by 2040. So
By the time you get around
By
to
the
the
time you
Vernon
get
Hills
around to
ones,
doing
it
them,
may
it was
be as
just-
expensive.
and
Gotcha.
as we get closer,
Excuse me.
this is a living document. We need to keep updating pricing as we see, as we move through and we continually work on the document.
Does that make sense?
Right, yep, I
So-
get it.
LHS library, this space that we're in, it functions, but we do not believe that this space is optimal. And we believe there's a lot of improvement that can be done in this space, right? As a real example, right? It functions, but it's not optimal. Vernon Hills, finishing the LED lighting upgrade. One of the projects this year was doing a lot of classroom lighting upgrades in that building. You'd be surprised to know, even though this building is bigger, Vernon Hills uses more electricity, and that's because the lighting has not been upgraded at that building. So Mark had a project this year that came because another project came in extremely under budget. And so we pivoted to this project to start replacing the lighting, which certainly has sustainability for sure benefits to it. But finishing that up, that wasn't a comprehensive thing for the whole building. So finishing that up in the building. LHS, the cafeteria here, again, it does function, not optimal, extremely suboptimal. I would say this is probably the top priority if you ask Tom for his building in terms of getting this space to run more efficiently. LHS first floor ceiling and LED. A lot of the corridors and everything have been replaced and LED lighting, but not the entire building yet. So we would want to finish that. Locker rooms. Are the locker rooms original?
Yes.
Yeah. So those again, they function not optimally, but they're not cheap either to look at, but we believe worth looking at. LHS future electrical distribution. So this is really what Mark's identified. There's going to need something done to the electrical distribution system for this building. It's undetermined exactly what yet, but that's an important thing that we'll need to look at down the road. The Warcheck locker room on this site. Then in the future, looking at Vernon Hills, that wouldn't need it exactly right now, but within the next 10 years, looking at replacing those locker rooms again so that we don't run into a problem of 50 years from now, locker rooms that are suboptimal. The other three items that are really in either infancy or there's not really much more to say about them yet at this point is school storage. What I would say is when Tom and I started here, we met with all the departments and asked them, talk to us about your budget, your needs, what's going on. Almost every department, not every department, but almost every department told us two things. One, the furniture is literally getting in their way. And two, they don't have enough storage. So we believe we largely addressed the furniture issue, again, right before the pandemic hit. But the storage issue is still something that several departments have significant issues in, but it's really a building-wide phenomenon that we're looking at. And so they're gathering data right now, maybe not right now, but they're gathering data right now in the different departments of the things they need to store, how often they need to access them, things like that. So then our architect can kind of get a look at the whole building and see like, all right, where are we looking at? Rather than looking at one department at a time, we really need to look at this whole building in context.
Quick question.
Yes.
The word check locker room for somebody who
Yeah.
had an LHS student but not in athletics.
Oh, sure.
What is the word check locker room?
Yeah. You want to?
That's used for these, for sports. It's out at the north end of the stadium.
Oh, okay.
That's a
I-
building
I know
that
what you
was
mean.
built when they put in, I believe they put in a turf at that time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they
Let me
built
tell
that
you
locker
what
room
check.
facility out there.
It's
Yeah.
the smelliest place in the entire campus.
So, I mean, it's
I
a
got it.
locker room, so you don't expect it to smell nice, but again, not optimal. But it technically does what you need it to do.
Can I ask a question about school storage?
Yes.
When you say departments, do you mean within the department shared workspaces or across the department, classrooms included?
You'd have like P's, I don't have enough storage.
Yeah.
Or you could have athletics say, I don't have enough storage. B and G, I don't have enough storage. Fine
they-
arts, I don't have enough storage.
Do they mean in their department office space though?
They mean in places where their department is allowed to store things, not necessarily for their office, but you could
Got it.
have.
Wherever that may be.
Where, yeah, so
Okay.
like PE has balls and weights and all those kind of stuff. They're just saying, I don't have enough storage.
Right.
That would be like how that's what they mean. The other one is that have been relatively new is STEAM lab. So I think this was more kind of the excitement of seeing the STEM lab over at Vernon Hills that was done with that addition. And, you know, really the request coming like, it'd be cool if we could do something in this building. And we agree that that's something worth looking at. When, where, we don't know yet, but we do believe that's something worth looking at. And then finally, we have on there solar panels. So we've talked about solar in a few different spots before, and then we had a pandemic hit, and then looking at different things. So solar is not really in here, other than it's on this list of things that we believe we would like to look at. But in terms of exactly where and what and when and how much, that depends. So any questions on this remodel list?
Can you just reiterate, this remodel list is for projects taking place within the next 5, correct? Or 2 to 3, or I
No.
apologize. Can you just,
No,
Clarify.
these are the current requests and interests to remodel.
as soon as possible?
The remodel list is not the really must do in 3 to 5 years list.
Okay,
It's the wish list.
wish list, got it.
Yeah, a little more tighter than a wish list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere between the must.
You've not seen the wish list, so this is not a wish. I would say this is not. So,
We vetted. the wish.
yeah,
Okay.
say that as carefully as I can.
Okay,
But for example, the bathrooms at LHS are 2030, so it's farther out than 5 years, but
Right.
not
Yeah.
super long.
So the total right now, without obviously those 3 things, you're talking $27 million. Okay, just to help you understand, I'm gonna put some of that in context. So if you look at really the next 5 years, so 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, you see at the top there, those are fiscal years. We're in 22 right now. So 22, if you see the bottom, it says 10 million. That's because that's all the capital stuff plus the field house. So that's why it's a lot bigger. But if you look, and the stuff that we have kind of in the hopper or in the plan right now, you can see the total, 4.3 for 2023, 6.4 for 24, 8.3, 25, 4.7, 26, 2.8 for 2027. You see those numbers? All right. So this is the elephant in the room. What we annually budget for capital outlay ranges 3 to 4 million, depending on the year. In the plan, we have ranges over the next 5 years, 2.8 to 8.3 million on the year, depending on the year, and that doesn't include any remodels. So either we have to change the plan and try to do less stuff, see if we can push it out, or what we have to do is contribute fund balance to this. So for example, in those years, if we wanted to do the stuff that's in those lists for those 2 years, we would have to kick in, call it another 2 million, and then maybe another 4 million of fund balance to be able to do those projects in those years. Does that make sense? Okay. But the bigger problem is there's not enough fund balance to do everything. Let me kind of walk through what I mean by that. So let me walk through our fund balance, which, by the way, we really need a fund balance policy. I plan to take another crack at that probably in the next month or two to see how we can do with that. So let me walk through our fund balance. So we've got, we have, as of July 2021, so this past July, our fund balance reported with about $84.7 million. Right. And like, well, Dan, like, what do you mean? You said 27 million plus a couple extra million, you got $84 million. Like, tell me, this is like you saying you have a problem, but you don't really have a problem. We do have a problem. So that was July. What we do need to do is project what would the end of this year looks like. So as a reminder, our budget for this year had a $6.4 million deficit, but the only reason for that deficit is because we're doing the $6.5 million field house renovation. So if we weren't doing that renovation, we would be flat. And if you remember, we talked, we have a very, very small surplus in this budgeted year. So if that happens exactly to the dollar, which it won't, right? Because this year COVID is still coming. So we probably are coming underspending, which look forward for next month when I give you a mid-year financial update on how are things trending. But if it did happen exactly that way, you're talking at the end of, or you're talking in July 2022, we'd have a fund balance of 78.3 million. Still, I'm hearing Dan, I still don't see a problem. That still should be plenty of money to do whatever you want to do. Not really. What we always do is back out our early taxes that we get in the spring, because those monies that we get in May and June are really for next year. So every year, the early taxes, it's about 40 million, depending on the year, it's 40, 41, 38, whatever. It's about $40 million if you want to keep it simple. So that means that really the fund balance you have available, because if you don't count the money that you get like at the very end of the year, that's really for next year, you're talking, you have 38.3 million. And boy, that's a lot less money, right? In addition, ISB wants to see a 25% fund balance. Additionally, for us, we don't have a policy, but I would like us to have a policy. And if we have a policy that says we want a reserve of at least 25%, not including early taxes, that means 23.6 million based on an operating budget of 94 million. So this is not a cheap operation to run. $94 million to run this place. 25% would be 23.6 million that you have to just keep there. And the reason you keep it there is really like cash flow purposes. So in case you're delayed by property tax, which if you've been here through the pandemic, we absolutely had a scare for that. Now, thankfully, we had plenty sufficient reserves. It was not an issue for us, but stuff can happen. And so they would say the 23.6 million you have to keep there no matter what. So then out of that 38.3, take away the 23 million, you're left now with 14.7 million. And what I'm saying is 14.7 million is not enough to do $27 million of work. And that doesn't include like the steam lab, solar, storage, whatever. That's what I'm saying is the problem. So essentially, like if Denise came to me and said, hey, Dan, like I really want to do some projects, how much money can you spend and really not mess anything up? I would say $14.7 million is what you have. Does that make sense?
And that's assuming that we would run our balance down to the bare minimum. What ISB's saying is 25%, that you should have at least that in there.
Correct. So what do I mean by that? So ISB gives a financial profile score, and there's a few things that they look at. One of the things they look at is your fund balance percentage. If it's under 25%, you get knocked down a rating. If it's 25% or more, you get the highest rating in that category. Additionally, they want 6 months of cash on hand, but early taxes would basically always mean, as long as you have 25%, you're always gonna have at least 6 months cash on hand. So that would really, one thing solves another thing. But yeah, you could have a policy that says, we want 40. But if you had a policy that said only 20, I would say, excuse me, we may run into a problem with ISB basically saying District 128 is not as strong as really they should be, which we don't want to be in that position.
And the idea behind ISB recommending a 25% fund balance, that's not for emergencies. What's the concept behind recommending a 25% fund balance? What's that supposed to be for?
I would say I don't know that I would say it's a requirement from ISB to have 25% balance. What I would say is districts that have a 25% balance are rated the strongest financially. If you are less than 25%, you are knocked down a rating in terms of your financial strength.
And what are the consequences of being knocked down a financial rating?
It depends on how many times you get knocked down, but if you, one of the things is you will go from, oh man, I can't remember the categories off the top of my head. But you go, so you go from like really super strong to like kind of strong, like not so strong to like financial watch is the financial recognition is the highest. Sorry, now it's coming back to me now. Financial recognition is the highest. There's another category, I can't remember the name. Then there's like warning and then watch and then warning. And so if you drop too low, you get into the subcategory, which I got to be honest, I don't know that we're ever going to be in because so many other bad things have to happen. The state will take you over. That's happened in North Chicago. That's happened down south. I don't ever see us getting to that point. And if we do, then I failed you miserably. And you'll have way more problems than just your profile score, I assure you. So it gets knocked down as viewing that you're not as financially strong as ISB would want you to be. I don't know if that helps. So why have 25%? It's really kind of the same philosophy that people say, you really should have 3 months savings in your bank in case something happens and you lose your income. And then really what they'll say, once you have 3 months savings, what should you have next? 6 months savings, right? So it's the same idea personally, just expanded on an organizational level. And really that idea is meant to offset any disruptions in revenue collection. So if something weird happens, like say a pandemic hits and you're supposed to collect property taxes, but man, you can't let people leave their homes and they're freaking out. And so they decide, we're just going to delay property taxes by 3 months. You could run into a significant problem because that's just one example. Or ISB, the state of Illinois, it hasn't been as much a problem lately, but definitely a few years ago, like you were 90 days late on timely payments from the state. Like they would say, hey, comptroller, pay the districts. And they would say, okay. And it would sit there for 90 days until they actually paid it because they didn't have the cash to pay it. So it's really meant to be it's truly meant to be a buffer in case of disruption to your revenue flow. That's really what the purpose is.
Understandable. And that makes me as concerned as you that we don't have a policy about it. Did you say you think it'll take 2 to 3 months for you to bring a policy for us to consider?
No, we've tried twice since I've been here. We've been unsuccessful so far, but I will try again and we will see how we go. It was a different board, so we have a different board now and we will see how it goes.
Yeah, and really some of the history on that is we haven't had to worry about having only 25%, having a policy for 25% when we had 100% in the bank. We had such high balances. It wasn't a priority to set a 25% limit. And there was some concern that, should we have it 40%? Should we have it 35%? So there was always some of this, how high should we make that versus how much should we spend on projects that we know we need to build? And so it just never rose to the level of, okay, let's just get this done. But I think now that we're getting down to the point where we've done some of these projects that we had this money set aside to do, and we're getting closer to that 25%. So what will we be with it? 14 included in there, maybe 35% at the end of this year?
The 38, you mean?
Yeah, with the full 38.
Yeah, it's probably like 40.
Yeah, 35, 40%.
Probably 40.
So now that we're getting down in that range where we're getting closer to that 25% threshold that ISB looks at, I think it's very important to have that.
Yeah, one example
policy in
would be
place.
like if you came up to me now and said, hey, Dan, like, do we have any money that we can, I would have a hard time right now saying no, kind of knowing how the numbers are really looked at and reflected. Like, I really, I'm saying with this, like, looking at my position and my experience, I'm telling you, like, you've got 14.7 million you could spend on a project and it won't affect anything. And it won't affect anything. Once you go beyond that, now you got to be a little bit more careful. And again, that's remembering this year turns out exactly like it's very possible. Say you end up with a $2 million surplus this year because we didn't do as much of whatever this year. And remember, $94 million budget, like $2 million is extremely possible. You know, that just adds on potentially there. So, and then part of it is even with the fund balance policy, one thing that you can do, for example, is like, all right, anything that is over this percentage, we can decide that we want to automatically have it go towards whatever. You could say anything over 25%, we want to dedicate to a capital project. It really depends. And there's extreme flexibility for the board to pick whatever they want to do. You could say, we're going to take half of it and the other half we're going to do something else with. So there's a lot of flexibility that boards have in terms of how to structure a policy. Really the purpose of the policy is to enact your will, like, for the organization, so that you don't have to have these kind of one-off meetings. You've already expressed, this is our will, and this is how we want it to run. So,
And it indicates some fidelity to the stewardship of the budget that we oversee, and we're responsible for operating the district. And as an employer, I think that policy reflects our commitment to that responsibility. Can you, totally side note, and you could even table this if it's really irrelevant, but remind me, how much in ESSER funds are we anticipating, and have we earmarked that for anything relevant to what you've presented tonight?
ESSER 3, it's about $500,000. 400,000 is for the HVAC stuff that we did last summer, and the other 100,000 that we're working on developing would be our plan right now. So we don't have it kind of drafted to give you, but we've been working on it with DLTs to do some interventionist help, math at this building, and then social emotional interventionist.
And that's consistent with
each
the
building.
guidelines of ESSER, because that money
Yes.
can't be spent on whatever we feel like. There are guidelines for use. So the things that you just mentioned are consistent with the guidelines for use of those funds.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more quick comment, and you made a good point, both of you, in terms of when we set this limit. You mentioned, what do we do with anything over the 25% or whatever percent we decide to put there? And we target it for future capital projects, that kind of thing. We can also identify it as to reiterate our policy of not spending surplus on operating expenses. So you could actually put something in there that anything over that 25% can't be used to pay ongoing operating expenses. It needs to be set aside for capital, for maintenance, whatever we decide to set it aside for. So I think that's an important thing too.
Good point.
Well, now that we have this list, this roadmap, that makes it a lot easier to put. Yes, it is a challenge in that there are a lot of things that need to be done and taken care of, but at least we know what the priorities are and have a roadmap to get to it.
It just puts us in a position to make better decisions.
Yes.
So,
I
sorry.
I need one clarification. I'm still not very clear on why did you take the 40 million out?
Oh, that's a good question.
So the fund balance that's reported at the end of the year, so that 84 million or even the 78 million, that is our actual fund balance as of June 30th, also July 1st. That includes property taxes that we receive in late May and June, because the property tax cycle, we basically get paid twice a year, essentially in property taxes. You get paid in June and September, October. You get paid basically twice a year, and then that money kind of lasts. So really what we're saying is the money that we receive in June is really not for, the money that we're going to receive this May and June is really not to fund this fiscal year. Like the fiscal year is over with, right? We've already spent the money. Like we spend salaries and benefits, like those clock on just like normal. Really, that money is for next year's operations.
It's loading up the checkbook and then we
But because in our financial
write against
reporting, we don't fully defer those revenues. It's listed in our fund balance. And so we have always talked about backing that out because that is really money that is for next year's operations.
Okay, that
Another-
helps me. So it's gonna be spent for next year's operations. It doesn't get added into this fund here.
No.
Good question.
Another way to look at it is if we decided, oh, I'm going to spend $40 million on a new building, we wouldn't have money to pay our bills next year.
Correct. You do not have $40 million to spend.
Right.
just scared him, Jim.
So I'll just ask another kind of dumb question. So let's say we spend all the $14.7 million and we have the 25% left. And is that it? We can't do any more capital projects ever? Or how do you kind of build that balance back?
What I would say is you would either need to have, so say you spend all that money and it's done. You'd either, in order to spend any more, you would have to have room, you'd have to have the surplus in your annual budget to be able to expand the capital spending. Or you have to find another source of revenue to do those projects.
So the tax.
If we go more tax.
So it would mean
Like go to
Cutting
higher tax
referendum.
revenue.
cutting the budget.
I did not say that word. I just,
No, I know, but that's
These are all
an
the
option. Yeah.
options of where
Yeah.
to get
Or
that.
we
Yeah.
cut the budget.
Yep.
And then take.
Or
some
some
of it.
combination of those things.
yeah. Or you would have to cut something else currently in the budget to make more room for that. So just think of your home, like, man, I want to redo my kitchen, but I don't have 10,000 to redo my kitchen. I've only got 5,000 to redo my kitchen. Well, I either got to borrow that money, and there's very, 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 very strict rules about districts borrowing money, or I have to cut my expenses until I can save up the money to buy it, So same thing, just on a more zeros.
A lot more zeros.
All right. So given that there's not enough money to do everything that we believe is worth looking at, we have to prioritize. And that is a tricky process because different people have different priorities, right? And so our leadership team will develop a process to prioritize potential capital outlay projects, how to prioritize the information that you've seen as well. What we are looking for from you, and now if you have it or you want more time, think about it and send it to me later, is what input, feedback, thoughts, or recommendations do you have about this process?
Dan, just one quick question, and maybe I missed it in here, but so you had the spread of all the maintenance replacement projects for the next 20 years here. And concerned about the couple of years of 2025, that's over 8 million, that kind of thing. Is there someplace that can give us some idea of what causes those blips? I know it's probably on that list of things to do, and that may be just one of the bigger projects, but is there something in here that I'm missing that would give us some clue as to what those couple really bad years are?
What I would say is, so the attachments, if you scroll to the later pages, there's a little bit more detailed information. You can see what categories those are in. If you actually download the Excel spreadsheet that is
Okay,
in the
I'll do
packet
that.
that's available, anyone can download it. That'll tell you exactly specifically what it is. So some of it is the timing of some big things that are kind of hitting.
There'll be notes in there.
Yeah, it doesn't make them go away. It just,
Doesn't make them go away.
Explains it.
But and that doesn't mean that it's going to happen exactly this way, because what I'm about to show you next is, okay, we have this list. Now we're going to really talk about what we're actually going to do this summer, which is not necessarily exactly what's on this list. So it's a guide because some things shift, some things move up, some things will move back. It's a fluid list.
Well, I have one piece of feedback and it's gratitude that I know that this has been a topic that has been circling for the years that I've been on the board. And I like things laid out in steps that I can see, even if we don't necessarily do it in that year, at least I know this is what needs to be done. This is what we as stewards of the taxpayer dollars need to make sure that we are thinking about, because we have to provide the educational environment that's effective for these kids, and maintaining our buildings and our sites and remodeling things and making sure things are maintained is a huge part of our job. And this really is very helpful. And I know that this probably took a lot of time and energy on your part, and I want to thank you guys for that.
Well said.
Here.
And I know you've done all the due diligence of talking to the building folks, talking to the department supervisors.
So one of the things that I'm imagining is trying to make sure that if we're bringing a list to you of recommended priorities, that we're on the same wavelength with what you're valuing. So for example, in some of my past districts, we've made sure that capital outlay was aligned to whatever strategic plan goals we might have. And that was one category of the capital outlay, was alignment to strategic plan goals. Another would be, in some districts, it's been about equitable investment at each site. Not the same amount of money, but that we're going to, so there were certain criteria or ways of thinking about what are the things that's going to set one project higher in importance than another project. And so that would be things that, again, Dan and I, from our past experience, have some ideas, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's going to be helpful to you as the people who vote on those final expenditures. So if you have ideas tonight or want to think about it or set up a time to talk separately with Dan, but as it's helpful to me to know what are some of those big concepts that you want us to make sure, if we're bringing bathrooms and library and this, and we have them in a certain recommendation for you, that you can easily take that information in and have a good board discussion about it, and then make your final vote.
Yeah, I would say, just for me personally, I would hesitate to give you priorities, because I know that we value things that directly impact students. Right. But we also very much are aware that we must keep our buildings in good working order. And even though it's not fun, like Dan always likes to use the example of think about your home. I don't love replacing my hot water heater, but it's absolutely essential, even though I don't really see it, and I'd rather spend that money on something else more flashy,
Aesthetically
a new program or a new some sort of system. That there's got to be a very healthy balance of aligning to the strategic plan for the maximum impact on students, with really responsible, very practical guidance about the things that we need to do to keep our buildings in good working order. Because, we've seen not too far away, we had two communities, I believe in both Barrington as well as in Hinsdale, where they had, for probably very good reasons, they pushed off just standard maintenance things. Really, the not sexy stuff, like the hot water heater that nobody really wants to do or spend money on. And again, I'm sure they had very good reasons for making the choices that they made, but hopefully we can put ourselves in a position with really careful planning of balancing, what's going to have the most impact on students and the more practical maintenance things. I would hesitate, though, to say, I think bathrooms are more important than a library, or a library is more important than bathrooms. That I really feel like that is something I would look to you after careful evaluation with the site teams to prioritize those things, as opposed to say, I think a library is more important than a bathroom, because I think that's backwards.
Maybe, I want to make sure we're speaking the same language, because I know if the forecast is for us not to have the surplus we've had in the past. So we're going to need to be able to explain these priorities to the public. So I want to make sure if we're bringing these recommendations to you, it's with the language and the information that you'll need to say, this is why we're doing projects A and B and not projects C and D. And that you feel good that we as a administrative team are making recommendations that you can then support and articulate to the public. Because there's some things on that list that we're not going to be able to do unless we
Right.
find more resources.
I'd add two two quick comments. One is, I just appreciate having this level of data and having the foresight of what really do we need over a span of a fairly long period of time. I can't imagine many districts have that kind of foresight as to, in 2030, we're going to need bathrooms at remodels at Vernon Hills. So I think, and I also, my other comment is, I don't think there's anything on this list that's frivolous in any way, shape, or form. It's all stuff that will eventually need to be done. So it's not a matter of what gets priority that gets done and doesn't get done. In my mind, it's more what gets priority to get done sooner. And then we try to continue to work the process as time goes on to fit these other things into the budget at some point in time in the future when we can afford it. And so it's not a matter of does it get done, it's maybe how you prioritize what gets done first.
I'm curious if there's been any discussion or analysis of which of these projects could potentially save us money down the road or cut from our current operating costs or potentially generate income. Like I'm looking at solar panels and thinking to myself, yes, obviously a very costly project, but at some point, at least this is to my understanding, you're in the green with solar, right? You can sell back to the grid even in theory. Do any of these items kind of check several boxes when you're completing these projects in both, well, in multiple areas? What is best for students? What accomplishes sustainability? What allows our buildings to run with maximum efficiency and even potentially save us money down the road so we can punt those funds to the next project? That's something that just looking at this list immediately I'm thinking. But back to kind of what Lisa was saying, I feel very comfortable with, handing those discussions over completely to you guys. You're the experts in, assessing what that all does.
What I was going to say is, it might, you could consider sort of categorizing this by what problem does it solve? For example, you have safety of the building, or you have an educational goal you're trying to achieve, or efficiency of space.
Yep.
I mean, I'm just picking these up from the discussions we're having there, and maybe then we have to rank sort of what's the importance of those categories for us. Like safety is highest, education is second. I'm making this up, but you kind of force rank those categories, and then that helps you make the decision on, is a bathroom more important or is a library more important?
Right, and as
Yeah.
Jim said, that means what's more important gets done sooner.
What's the priority?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the two things I would say, I should have said it before, but I'm going to say it if I didn't say it again. This is not a prioritized list. This is just a list that is
Right.
just
Right.
what I
A
decided
list.
to write first. Second is, I believe all the things that we would say are safety related are covered under the maintenance replacement area. None of these areas I would say are safety areas. I would say these are suboptimal areas. But none of these stick out to me, other than the future electrical distribution, which you want to make sure that is safe. That's not a current safety thing at all. So,
Unintended.
pardon?
You said it's not current.
No pun.
No pun intended.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm shocked.
I love those science teacher jokes.
So could you like think of prioritizing this further down? Just this list, for example. So if we say everything with maintenance was sort of on the safety side, as an example. If you were to take this list and break it down into, is it all efficiency or is a STEAM lab more educational goal? Or like solar powers, like Kara was saying, maybe that is a sustainability goal, which also could save us money elsewhere. You know, so can you break this down into smaller groups or different groups?
I think what we can do is we can add those dimensions to each of these, is what I would say. We can add, how does this serve students? How many students maybe potentially are affected? Like, so like, this is some of the notes that I'm kind of walking away with. How does this, how could this affect sustainability? Does this help in some way? Does it really not have any impact? Several of these for sure would impact sustainability. They're not necessarily as direct as solar panels. Direct, does that count as a pun too? But they're more indirect. Also a thing like, does doing this work then offset lessen other costs for us in the future? Like LED lighting, for example, means we will use less electricity, which means we will spend less on electricity, which means you can spend more on something else. Those kind of things. And then I think a really great one is like, what problem is this trying to solve? I think those are really, really good dimensions of all of these that we could put in to try to help us think about these projects that that will help, I think, look at these projects and also help, I think, as a group, understand and be able to prioritize as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's excellent feedback.
It's great. Well done, everybody.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you again. This has been a great conversation. I am very happy to have this information and want to digest it for a little bit, but I think we've had some good feedback and thoughts here. So Dan, did you want to move on to what we're doing this summer
Yeah.
now?
Excuse me. What's the best way for me to do this? Hold on.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback. Well, he's switching. I think all of you know I'm a systems thinker. So when Dan and I are working to try and see how can we do this for priorities, it's not just this. To me, it's like the next 5 years or linking it to other things. So the idea of sustainability goal or which educational outcome is it reaching? And sometimes safety will trump even education, or something like that, but that every major expense that we're going to be bringing to you for approval really should have some of those components that we should be able to answer to you. So it's this for capital outlay, but I would also want us to start to permeate this kind of thinking for major expenses in all parts of our budget.
Right.
Okay, so that was long-term. Now we'll go to, okay, all that stuff is theoretical. Now we're literally talking about what are we going to do this summer? All right. So what Mark does, take from that long plan and put together a real plan with real projects to really do this summer. And so what we want to do is kind of walk you through that right now. So this is also in your attachment, but so I'm just going to have a visual. I'm a visual person. So the first one is the fax room remodel. So that is a remodel that is on our list. That's something that we've been looking at for a while. And hit priority this year, 1.5 million. That is a very high estimate because it's 2 fax rooms and usually that wouldn't cost $750,000 a piece to renovate those rooms.
I'm sorry, will you
What's a
clarify the
fax?
acronym?
Hello, Family Consumer Science.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. I apologize.
No problem.
That's habit. Family consumer science, like the foods rooms, where they cook and prepare food. There's some HVAC and as well as some sewer things under the ground that we'd have to address as well. So that is why this isn't a very expensive project, but also not totally sure how it's going to all work out until you actually bid it. So this could come in at $1 million. Not very likely it would come in at $2 million, but it can be higher or lower depending on what we're at. So we're looking at those rooms and we're actively designing those, and there's layouts and all this kind of thing. There's a meeting tomorrow to look more at that. So we have a lot of these projects, like there's kind of design things in different phases happening at different timelines for a lot of these projects. Remodeling the set of bathrooms. There are bathrooms right next to the fax labs. That would be, if you're going to do the bathrooms, this would be an ideal time because they're right next to it.
When you say sets, that means a set is a girls and a boys bathroom? Is that what a set is?
Yes, a set is the boys and girls bathrooms together. So in this case, it'd be 2 sets because you have 2 stacked on top of each other. You would do the plumbing down below. You want to do them both at the same time. Because
2 floors, they're not stacked on the same floor.
So that's why it's 2 sets, because it's a double bathroom and a double bathroom on top.
Thank you.
So because you're renovating the space right next to it, that's an ideal timeline to address it there. However, if you notice, there's no number there and it's moved off to the right because right now it's just too much money, right? That's kind of what that means. Next year, LHS is due for the 10-year health, life, safety. So that's every 10 years, each building we have an architect come through and do a health, life, safety that looks at every square inch of this building and the current health, life, safety codes and where are we deficient. And because there's all kinds of new stuff that happens every 10 years. So they look at that and then they'll give us a prioritized list of here's things you have to fix within a year or 3 years, and then things that, you probably should look at some point. So that's scheduled for this building for next year.
And the $45,000 is the fee for the inspection?
Yes. Yep. It's a very big process. And that's not something we can choose to not do. Abatement, there's a constant effort to abate the asbestos that's in this building. So that would be continue to look at that. Is that connected to the fax
It's
labs?
connected to the fax lab.
Got it. So, yep.
That'll be part of it.
Stadium bleachers,
Dan,
that's,
if that's connected to the fax lab, could you just add that in parentheses or
yeah.
something? So it's connected.
That the abatement isn't just in the library here, that the abatement is near the fax lab
Yeah.
construction site.
The reason we have it separated is because that's a specialized field, so we're gonna have our consultants manage that project. Exactly, and then so it won't be put into the bid, into that bid, it'll be bid as a separate project, because it's when you're dealing with asbestos, you don't want to tie that cost into the overall bid of, general contractor.
but I get what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I
connected
see
to
what
the
you're
fax.
saying,
It's connected to the fax.
Even in the notes category.
And
or
we could
something.
move it up so it's closer. Yeah, we can do that. That's no problem. Visitor bleachers. So the LHS. So this is now we're looking at one building and then we'll look at Vernon Hills. So this is all LHS stuff first. The visitor bleachers need some corrective action for ADA access on the visitor bleacher side. So co-op pricing is that's nationally bid pricing. So you it's already bid out, so you know exactly what those costs are. So that's a very, very specific number. He's got it set off to the right now because of the total cost of stuff. So this is something that would love to kind of move back if it can work out. But that's where he's at right now. Word check. So that building, one of the, it was built as a residential building, but it's essentially used for almost a commercial purpose. And there's not enough electricity running to that building. So they've been using generators for a long time to power everything when they run concessions. That is not ideal. And they're even getting to the point where they're having to pick and choose what things to run on the generator. And so we're made aware of this year. And so we'd like to correct that permanently. Drinking fountains there's nothing really there right now, but that was something we're looking at. John Deere, that's a tractor.
Yeah, it's a piece of
Tractor.
lawn equipment, yeah.
Yep. That's set off to the side right now. Stadium hardscape, that's the,
Walkways,
Yeah.
sidewalks, ramps, things like that.
I don't know why they don't just say sidewalk, but it's hardscape. So that was total right now 1.67. And by the way, I should be clear, there's not a target of like, make sure you spend the same at each building. Sometimes it's happened that way, but that's not how this is generated. So that's total for LHS. Vernon Hills masonry repairs. So there is, when they were doing the masonry work last summer, there was a discovery that there was some weak masonry at the, what direction?
At the
East
east entrance.
East
main
entrance. The above that, thank God they were able to look at it. So that was made safe temporarily, but we really need to kind of redo that whole area. So that's to address that specific issue. That for sure would be a safety issue. Again, it's not a safety issue right now. It's temporarily like put in there, but it's not a permanent fix. It's something that needs to get addressed permanently that we would do this summer. The EFS wall. So the Vernon Hills, the really tall part, when you're looking at Vernon Hills, that kind of sticks up in the middle, that's the fly tower for the
Auditorium, right.
auditorium. So when they bring up stage things, let me try to say it and then you can fix it. The wall around there needs to get fixed, but that is causing a domino effect. You need to fix that before you can touch the roofs that are next to that. If you fix the roofs and then fix this, you will cause a problem. Is that?
Correct, yes. We need a scaffold to do that. So you're gonna scaffold on top of a brand new roof in later years. You're gonna damage that roof you just put down a couple years ago and, or pay more money to cover that roof to protect it, to have all these contractors. So strategically,
So in knowing the roofs need to start getting on a cycle to be addressed, this is well, before you do that, you really need to do this. So this is like a perfect example of nothing exciting at all. But if you do this out of order, you could cause problems later on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Then starting the roof replacement. So part of this is some of the roofs that he's working on scope and everything right now. We got $50,000, the state maintenance grant to help towards this. So we have to do some type of roofing because that's what we put in for a state maintenance grant to get the matching $50,000 that they gave us. I think they might have already sent us the money to kind of begin that process with Vernon Hills. The library windows, so they are, next time when we have our board meeting there, if you go in the library, you'll look way high up. There's these little tiny windows, like two by whatever, right? They're too
yeah,
high.
they're small, the small section.
These little tiny windows that, well, you explain this part. I
They're
don't.
not energy efficient. This was another one of the reasons why we have the issue, in this, when we're doing our board meetings. But it's also, here's another example where those windows are tied into doing the roofing and getting the proper flashing put in so you don't have any leaks in the future. So it's one of those, same thing as the EFS. You need to do this step before you can continue on with the other steps. So.
Carpet replacements. So the corridors in Vernon Hills are different than the corridors in this building. There's carpet in those corridors. And so those for sure, some of them are pretty rough. Those need to be replaced. We've been kind of doing pieces at a time. So it's about 90,000 a year we've been spending to kind of do this. So that's at this plan continuing.
Are those original carpets currently?
We've already placed some of them, so it depends on what location you're talking about, but I think the ones that are the bad ones are the original.
Yeah, they're the oldest ones. So yeah, it would be replaced to match everything that's new gone in, the new foyer and
Like
everything.
the foyer is new, so
Yeah.
that would
Foyer's
be-
new, so these are the areas that haven't been completed yet, just do hallways. and
But if you're
go-
walking in a hallway in that building, you notice, ooh, this
Yeah,
is rough
old and new.
carpet, that's probably the original carpet.
And generally speaking, is carpeting at Vernon Hills replaced about every 20 years or so?
It
Well, It's
was,
never been replaced yet.
I mean, I guess that, which.
It was
What's a
has
good
been.
replaced
cycle?
one-
What's the life cycle?
Yeah,
What
Yeah.
would the life cycle for carpet, 10 years?
they're saying 10 years for a life cycle
okay,
is what's recommended, but classrooms, you don't get the amount of usage, it's the hallways where you get the usage. So we should be able to get 20 out of a classroom and at least 10, we're shooting for 10 out of the hallways.
okay, thank you.
Is it standard now to use carpet tiles so that you can replace
Correct, and that's
a
what we'll
little
be
bit
using
here
for
and there
carpet.
rather than?
Yes.
Oh, may I ask another parallel question, but not entirely related? What is like a life cycle of linoleum or what,
Tile.
we don't always use linoleum anymore or ever for that matter, I suppose. What do we have here at LHS?
Solid surface.
Just tile?
VCT
Okay,
is tile. And what
BCT stands for,
vinyl composition tile. And they say life expectancy is 10 years on that also,
Okay.
but you get
more.
proper maintenance and repair and waxing and that you get a lot longer. You'll see color, you see different colors, that's for the sunlight.
Yeah,
But as far as the durability of the floor, it does, we do get a longer lifetime out of it.
just curious. Thank you.
baseball infield. So the infield of that, that's not the, what is that? That's the.
It's a
mix?
turf, it's artificial
turf,
infield.
Artificial turf of the infield. But that's set aside for right now, based on everything else, pick up with the plow. So just so happens to be very similar cost. So right now you're looking at 3.25. We budgeted this last year was 3.1. We can actually, you try to like increase it a little bit. So 3.2 is kind of a good target number for it to be at right now. But the biggest outlier is going to be this. So until we get this really bid that we'll know, there's a few things we can move in quickly if this does come in under that we would love to happen. But we won't know until we actually bid it out with the proper scope. So normally in a year, we would give you this like in February and then kind of start the process of bidding and do that kind of stuff. If you recall, we're in weird times and there's more lead times on stuff. So Mark has had this sense, has received this sense of urgency. And so that's why, right, we're bringing this earlier than we would have otherwise because some of these things have longer lead times that we really need to get after in order for this stuff to get done for the start of school next year. I feel like same conversation we had back in, were you all here when we did the HVAC stuff for the field house? Okay. Same kind of concept of stuff. So I guess before you get into like what's going to come soon, which is really like the bottom part of that agenda, any questions on this list?
Has the cost of goods kind of stabilized or it's still twice as much?
Depends on what you're talking about, but costs are very volatile. Mostly going up. It depends on the trade and the material you're talking about. The best way I could say it. Like right now, I don't know, lumber would not be probably a good time to buy that right now. But it could always go up too.
For example, roofing products. The roofing products. They're projecting a 15% increase in January 1st. They're projecting a 15% increase in March, April, and they're projecting another 15% increase in June, July, and that's your delivery times. So that's compounding 15%. So 15%, now another 15% on the already increase. So we actually laid out last August, we have established more roofing than what we are actually going to do, and it's already been ordered. Schools are high priority, so whatever doesn't get used at our school will get used at a different school. But in our bid process there, in those numbers, we are calculating that escalation into our bids. And we're actually going to do it as a budget number. So the contractor can't just say, well, I'm going to mark up the 50, 60% increase and say it only goes up 45% or 40%. So we're going to actually, from the date that they bid it and we'll have a price at that bid date. and then a price when they actually purchase and it's delivered, and we will pay the difference between the bid. And we'll have it put in our budget. So we're actually going to pay whatever the increase is, to make sure we're saving money. And not overpaying for the materials. But that's an example with the roofing products going up compounded, 15% 3 times in the next 6 months.
I appreciate you identifying the projects that are linked together, not just physically, like the fax rooms and the bathrooms, but financially, that, when we look at the bid for the fax, it might be nice to kind of get an idea. I wouldn't hold you to any numbers necessarily, but to say, okay, if we don't do the bathrooms, this is how much more it will cost when we do go to do those. Those are the kind of things that kind of help build the case of, okay, this may be a little bit more than we thought we were going to spend, but if it's going to save us money in the long run, particularly with the escalation of costs in the next year or so that may be happening, it may be something we want to throw in there and find a way to pay for it.
Well, and it just so as a little side note, as for roofing projects, we were going to be, when they built the building, we are bringing it up to current energy code. So we're going to have the proper insulation on the roof, which is going to save us money and fuel in the future as we replace all those roofs, because everything was done to a minimum code when the building was built.
Good to know. And we'll be seeing some of these come through, as it says further on in the agenda in.
Yes, I have
contracts.
some dates for everybody.
Any other
Anything else for this list?
questions, concerns?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. That was a lot of detail tonight. All right, moving on to bills payable. Check releases for December. Anything?
Yep, sorry, let me just. I don't want you to listen to my, oops, sorry.
Technical difficulties?
Too many things go
I apologize. Board report. Yeah, so in December, you may or may not recall, we talked about every year in December, and we actually have it at the end of June as well. There are, well, we have another bill run that happens after the board meeting. In December, the reason why we do that is because we have an early December meeting, and then usually January is later. And so that is a very large gap. It's usually like around 50 days. This year wasn't quite as bad as about 40 some days, but that's still a long time to go without paying some bills. And so what we said is bills that come in that we feel need to get paid in this timely manner, that we will pay them, but then we'll report to you next time on what those were. That's what this list is. So this will be on for consent agenda at our board meeting, but I said I would give you this information next, and that's what this information is. So if you ever have questions, we'll be happy to help. And, you've got time. This is not for approval or anything. It's not a board meeting agenda item right now. So.
Any questions or concerns on that?
No.
Okay. Moving on to D128 Sustainability Committee.
Yes. Dan, do you mind plugging back in to show that presentation? I saw you unplug and I was like, no.
I'm sorry. We rehearsed this, didn't we?
So while Dan's plugging that back in, I'm so pleased when I got to see the presentation and all the work that was done 2 years ago on the idea of a sustainability committee, and having a chance to talk with Tom, who was on that seed idea team and who shared this presentation. So, but because we have 3 new board members since the time that this presentation was made, I thought that would be a very good place to start, is the why we are interested in a sustainability program and potentially committee. And then to say with this new board's input, what might be a reasonable timeline for moving forward with that. So next slide.
Hold on one second.
Sorry.
Let me, I got out of the Zoom. I didn't mean to get out of the Zoom. I panicked. 1 second. Eli, is that good? Okay, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Next slide. So again, actually, Kara, you were using the language from these slides when you were talking about sustainability and, the idea. And when we talk with students, we hear a lot of this language in student voice, the idea of taking care of our needs today so that they still have choices for their own future. And as an educational organization, I think that's one of our missions, and it is a daring mission. So the seed of this work is local as well as global, and it definitely resonates with our students. Next slide. Again, the idea of students being interested, it's also a way for us as a community to model this kind of practice. It is fiscally responsible, and it aligns with the daring mission. Next. So there were, 2 years ago, they considered 2 different paths, either a board committee, which would be operating under the policy 2.150, or a district committee that would not be as policy driven, but could have just as strong of recommendations coming out of it. And 2 years ago, the recommendation was for it to be a district committee. And I would still have that be our recommendation moving forward. But I, again, wanted the new board members to know that there are 2 paths we can take when we want to launch an initiative like this. Next slide. So the idea of this committee would be beyond just the board. So that's why we're trying to get students involved. We would get community members involved. The other thing that I think is perfect timing now is this partnership with some of the other local Vernon Hills Township and some of the other things. So in terms of planets aligning, I think it's very good that the audit and some of the other things that they're talking about doing really fit nicely into this particular project. Next slide. So the process, determining the committee ownership, and I think that one is one question I want to come back to in terms of having a sustainability policy or having some of these other kinds of things. At what point are we going to link this particular group's work back to what expected outcomes? And so I think ownership to me is ownership and accountability. In terms of forming the committee, feel very comfortable recruiting. Tom has a lot of students, and as does John, who are interested, as well as staff members. I mean, the tour we took here of the restoration in the garden area, courtyard area, would just be one example of that. We would align this group's work to the district mission and then set goals and timelines. And I really liked this phrase about having this be a filter through which other decisions would be met. So again, it could be capital outlay projects. It could be some other kinds of things that we're doing. This committee could have some input in that, or at least help set some of the guidelines. Next slide. And here are some examples again, and we've done some of these. So that was another thing that was really nice to see. The LED lights are up there. We do have a student run recycling program. The bioswales, I don't think we've done that yet, but
We do have
We
some.
have-
we do have some bioswales. Thank you. See, okay, great. I just was not educated
They're
on
right
that.
here, right?
Yeah, they're right by the new pool.
Oh, see, wonderful. So again, sometimes putting your ideas to paper, they happen, even if a committee didn't happen to shepherd them, they still moved forward. But I know with a committee, we could do even more focused work. Next slide. Again, possible ideas for this. We did do native landscaping restorations. There's opportunities for future ones. The idea of LEED certifications for future projects. I think that is something that, again, you can have cost savings depending upon how you plan a lead project. It's more expensive at the beginning, but again, if we're trying to start our capital projects thinking 10 and 20 years out, we can show to the public then the cost savings over time when the return on investment will be realized. Next slide. And so here are some things that curricularly, we could also have this committee help us develop some new ideas for. One thing that I did want to share with you is the last example on there, the Green Ribbon School Award. The school district I was in Wisconsin, we were the first recipients of that back in 2012 when they very first started this. And that process is a very comprehensive process. The Green Ribbon School Award could be what we have as our accountability plan. Just keeping that application updated is an amazing accomplishment for a district. So I'm very familiar with district-wide work to get an organization to this level and the recognition that comes along with doing it very, very well. So it can happen. Hopefully this will be district number 2 that I get the green ribbon for. Next.
One question, how long does that process take?
The green
Green
ribbon
ribbon?
process. Well, again, I haven't done it for almost a decade now, but so it may have changed, but it was about a 6-month process to complete the application, especially if you're starting from scratch and if it's not things that you're used to getting, because it is some of the things that Mark was talking about on switching to LED saved this much. Partnerships that we have with different things in our community. It's a comprehensive application that requires a district to document and analyze and track.
Quantify probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a way, I do think that, if we say the Green Ribbon Schools is one of the targets that we would want to meet, that application would be evidence of our progress towards it.
It takes a while.
Mhm.
I've done one application
Mhm.
and I've learned some things.
Mhm.
The application might not take long, but to have everything in place to be able to apply is probably what takes longer.
Right. It takes
It-
you a while just to know what you don't know.
Yeah. Well, and getting the information. So we might be doing it, but it's getting the data in a way that you can show evidence that you're doing it the way that can score points on the environmental scale that they want you to show can be time consuming.
In order to get LEED certification, one of the things that had to be done was we had to go around to every faucet in the building and we had to time what the flow rate was for every single faucet. Bathrooms, showers,
Mhm.
toilets, janitor's closets, food service prep. Every place that water came out of a spigot had to be measured for this application.
Mhm.
It's daunting.
Mhm. All right, next slide. So again, this was the timeline when this was first moved forward and what we could do. And again, it already went through these processes. So it did receive feedback from the building leadership teams and it did receive feedback from the board 2 years ago. And we were approaching the idea of starting to recruit for the committee when COVID hit. And so everything just came to a screeching halt. The potential timeline that I would see would be, again, to get endorsement from this new board that this is the direction that we want to go. And then I guess I have 2 sort of strands of potential timelines. Wanting to make sure that we start, no matter what, having that sustainability lens with our capital outlay projects and starting to make sure, as Mark is already doing, outlining where we have cost savings opportunities and this and that. But the idea of this much more progressive and forward thinking idea, we could start it this spring with recruiting and then have it start, like I think most organizing, mission, vision work, that kind of thing, and then starting to launch any kinds of plans or recommendations starting in the fall. I also want to be sensitive to the fact that we are doing strategic planning work, and there could be some other committees that also might arise as something that we want to explore and do work on. So that was my question to the board in terms of timeline. Do we say, yes, this is one we're going to go with, and we're going to wait until April or May when our goal areas are clearly identified? And then from that, say, we're going to move forward with a sustainability committee. There might be an equity committee. Again, I'm not forcing, I'm predicting possible areas that would be goal areas that we would want to have. Some would be community and parent-based, some might be not. But again, trying to figure out ways that because we've made a commitment to this previously, I want to move it forward, but I also want it to be almost at a pace that's realistic to some of the other initiatives that we might be moving forward with. So I guess that's the feedback that I would want from the board, is the timeline for recruiting and launching this. It's not if, but when. And so I'm open to ideas on what we think would be a useful timeline moving this idea forward.
So you say recruiting, that means we start recruiting people then, or we recruited people and we get ready to start work on? I think you're saying the full former, right? Is
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, I think we have enough outlined that we can attract people to be a part of this group. And then, because it could be very, very large. And so then I think the idea of saying, okay, so what do we mean? And it could be something like reviewing the green ribbon application and saying, here's the 8 different areas that they're going to be asking us about. Are we ready to tackle all 8 of these areas of thinking about sustainability and education? And so I think that's where the committee would have some time to help define what the goals would be and a timeline based on this particular framework that we would be giving them. I guess I would want this committee to have obviously board representation, but also to have representation from people outside of the board that, again, could be bringing expertise and ideas of things we haven't even heard of yet. So in terms of membership, recruiting, forming the committee, having that group then refine the goal and the timeline, and then having that group report back to us periodically, quarterly or something like that.
because that group might also come up with, here are some actual skills and experience we need. And because I'm interested, but I don't have the hard skills. I might have some of the other skills that I could bring to the table, but I don't know anything about sustainability on its own, right?
Mhm.
So you got to probably think about, what do you want this team to look like? What kind of skills do you need that are technical
Mhm.
skills versus, let's say, supporting skills?
That's a great idea in terms of,
And if you have a starting group that comes together and say, okay, here's our goal, and therefore we need this type of help, then they might have more recruiting that happens
Mhm.
after they have that kind of initial discussion.
one of the structures that I've seen is where you have the sort of core committee. And then as there might be something where, let's say we're going to, just because that was the sample use, working on the solar project, you might then recruit additional members to help get the word out, to do some communication, to do some things. So I've seen it where you have like that core group that is a multi-year sort of foundation like thing. And then as different projects, different people with expertise or who have time to maybe not commit to a 3-year term on a committee,
Right.
but who have 3 months where they really want to get the word out or participate or volunteer. I've seen that be very successful also.
I think using something like the green ribbon application process as a framework is a lot of, there's a lot of thought that has gone into that, and that's really geared towards measuring how a district is responding in terms of sustainability. So it should have categories broken down and things that, would be logical things for us to look at and create as we create our framework. So I like that idea. I also like the idea of not to push this out, but to allow the strategic plan to sort of inform some of what we do with that group too. So I think the timing is good. I think by the time you do some of the recruiting and you start to organize this thing, we're going to be far enough along with the strategic plan that'll give us some runway to move from. But this is going to be a long process. This is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight or in 1 year or whatever. So this is like the strategic plan is going to be a mindset change that, it gives us sort of a guiding light as to how to move forward.
Were you asking for an agreement about the timeline, or?
Or at least some input in what people would be comfortable with.
I think whatever you can tolerate. I would like it to go fast because I think there's lots of things that we could be doing. Like I want to hit the ground running, but it has to be realistic. And if you can find places where we can utilize the strategic planning or not conflict with the strategic planning, you're in a better position to know what that is.
Okay.
But if you're looking at trying to get something in place so that we could begin the work by next fall, I would say that would be okay. I'd like I said, I'd like it to go faster, but I don't always get everything I want. And I think that people are working really hard right now.
Yeah.
And I want to be really sensitive to the idea that not only does everybody have their just regular jobs, but we have foisted COVID on top of that. And now everybody's doing twice as much work. So if it takes us a while to get there, I get it, because I don't want to, we're already burning people out. I don't want to burn even harder. I can remember bringing it up at the last meeting. I was like, kind of really want to get going on this, and just seeing poor John was just exhausted. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'm being a jerk here because people are just tired. So, I have a particular interest in it. And so I have, and I obviously have all this time off. So, I want to go, but I get that it's ridiculous to push too hard.
As part of from a timeline standpoint too, maybe, when you're looking at your strategic planning, I saw at least some things that overlap with this
Yes.
too. Maybe you can find the synergy in that process and you say, well, this piece, I'm gonna keep it aside and it will be handled by, you just don't pick it up under that, you
Right.
kind of defer it to the.
Some organic
Right.
follow through might come out of it.
Maybe that allows us to not do double or extra work on it. But yeah, timeline wise, it's really what is it that you guys can take on?
Right. And thank you for acknowledging the heavy load everyone is carrying right now. That's much appreciated. It doesn't mean these things aren't important. It means, like you said, that we have to be able to continue to do our work well. So.
And as a
only
district
24
goal, we're
hours in a
trying to
day.
do I'm sorry. Did I jump on top of something? I think that the strategic plan is more important. So that should take a priority. But in the meantime, we're already working on a
Right.
partnership. So
Yeah.
there, some of this work is already being
Yeah, we have a
done.
meeting on Wednesday night with the township and that group again. So you're right. We
Right.
are still moving forward. Never mind, that was postponed.
Okay, but it's the following week.
No, there is
Fine.
one Wednesday.
Yeah, I thought there was.
I thought it was postponed to the 22nd.
That's apparently a different meeting.
Ah.
So
The one
there's
Wednesday
a
is
Zoom
with
meeting
the-
on
with
Wednesday with
Feeder school, the
the
schools.
feeder schools.
Oh, I see. And then the one on the 25th.
And then the one on the 25th is,
Vernon Hills.
right. Does everybody know what we're talking about?
Not a clue.
So perhaps I could just fill people in.
Yeah.
So I
Uh,
had brought this up at the previous board meeting.
Right.
Talked about the Vernon Energy Commission.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It was coming through the township, and the idea was that local units of government could come together to pursue
Right.
infrastructure grants that came out of legislation that was passed in November. So because of Don's background, he kindly offered to step in and represent the board. Even though I had attended the first couple of meetings, Don and Denise are going to continue exploring the commission and seeing if there is something for us to pursue, if it will actually improve our chances of getting a grant. And then obviously we would have to decide as a board which of the items that came out of any of that work fit in with our capital projects, fit in with our strategic plan. And it would have to fit in somehow with the sustainability committee, although it will have already probably, some things might have already come out of the commission's work before the sustainability committee can actually make recommendations.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I just totally
No, that was great.
took all your thunder, but
No, I'm.
I just
I'm
wanted
afraid
to
of
refer back
microphones,
to
so it's
having,
good.
having discussed it at the last board meeting.
Right.
Briefly.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback that you all gave, and I feel like we can, during the presentation at the January meeting, where I give the update on the strategic planning, I think I could also talk about where some of these other future-based committees have spin off in terms of opportunities going forward.
Great. Well, we will look forward to continuing to discuss the sustainability potentials for our district. Moving on to, well, there's no approval for bids and contracts at this point, and we have already discussed some of the upcoming bids and contracts in the district capital, long-term capital plan. Any other comments you want to make about those? Or-
Maybe just for the sake of time, stuff that might even come for approval this month.
Right, so right now, a pre-bid meeting on Wednesday for the celestial windows at Vernon Hills.
Isn't that a beautiful day for those windows?
Yeah, and a bid opening on the 19th of January, so we will bring it to the January board meeting on the 24th.
Okay,
The other ones, pre-bids will start on January 21st for the roof, auditorium, EFS, and the masonry, and bid opening February 3rd, and bringing it to February committee meetings. And then we're, as Dan said, we're working on the fax rooms. And I just got the pricing for the pre-purchase of 2 pieces of HVAC equipment needed using co-op pricing. We'll have that for the board meeting. I just got the pricing a few hours ago. For $46,328.24. So I like to pre-order that. So I still have to review it and make sure everything's included in that equipment spec. So
and this is HVAC for?
this is HVAC for the fax rooms.
Oh, for the fax room. Okay,
2 air supplies,
okay,
vertical ventilation system.
okay.
Okay.
We appreciate you putting us on the accelerated track for that.
Okay.
All of those projects, really. If you feel that that's what they need in order to get done in a timely manner this summer, then we will rely on your expert guidance.
And if we can
you.
purchase things now
Yeah.
that we know we need in the summer to protect us from inflation,
Yeah.
that also is an upside. So thank you.
Yes, much appreciated. Okay, so we'll look forward to those at the board meeting, and then there is no obsolete equipment to discuss. Future agenda items, mid-year financial review.
Yeah, February, this is too soon to have December closed, so we'll have December closed in a week or so, and then we'll have review that at our February committee meeting and just reviewing, all right, 6 months fiscal year done. Let me show you where things are trending.
Great.
Revenues and expenditures. So buckle up.
We will look forward to that. Any other future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, this adjourns the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, January 10th.
Errol, you were only 2 hours early.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Carol.
As collective bargaining, we are going to take a 5-minute recess. Where will we be meeting? Right here. Right in here?
Yeah, where's Eli? Did you turn off the stop? Yeah, so yeah, we're just gonna meet in here and then they're gonna leave and they'll break the